The August heat sat heavy over western Nebraska, turning the air thick and sluggish. Caleb Ryder crouched beneath the rusted belly of his grandfather's John Deere, wrench in hand, shirt soaked through with sweat and hydraulic fluid. The tractor had given up the ghost 3 days ago, right in the middle of the North 40, and he'd been nursing it back to life ever since. He didn't hear the car at first. The wind covered most sounds out here, carrying them away across miles of wheat and prairie grass. But when the engine cut, the silence that followed was wrong. Too clean. Too expensive. Caleb rolled out from under the tractor, squinting against the afternoon glare. A black SUV sat at the end of his dirt drive, chrome gleaming like it had just rolled off some city showroom floor. Nobody drove cars like that out here. Hell, nobody drove out here at all, unless they were lost or looking for trouble. The driver's door opened. She stepped out in heels that sank immediately into the dust, and Caleb's first thought was that she'd taken a wrong turn somewhere back near the interstate. Had to be. Women who looked like that, sharp blazer, dark hair pulled back tight, sunglasses that probably cost more than his truck payment, didn't just wander onto failing farms in the middle of nowhere. She walked toward him without hesitation, heels clicking against the hardpack, and something in her stride made Caleb straighten up. This wasn't someone lost. This was someone who knew exactly where she was. Caleb Ryder? Her voice cut through the wind, crisp and certain. That's me. He wiped his hands on his jeans, knowing it wouldn't help much. You're a long way from anywhere. I know. She stopped a few feet away, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes were gray, sharp, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with the drive. My name is Elena Voss. I need to talk to you about something that's going to sound completely insane. Caleb glanced at the SUV, then back at her. If you're selling something, I need a husband by tomorrow. The words landed flat in the heat, and for a second Caleb thought he'd misheard. Had to have. But she stood there watching him, waiting, her expression completely serious. Ma'am, I don't know what kind of... I'm not joking. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a manila folder, thick with papers. And I'm not crazy, though I know how this sounds. I have about 10 minutes to explain this before my legal team realizes I drove out here alone, so I need you to just listen. Can you do that? Something in her voice made him nod. Elena opened the folder. 3 months ago, my father died. He built Voss Agricultural Holdings from nothing, 70 years of work, $12 billion in assets, operations in 43 states. He left it to me. She pulled out a document, holding it so he could see the letterhead. But there was a condition in his will, a clause he added 6 months before he died when he was already sick and probably not thinking straight. I have to be married within 90 days of his death, or controlling interest passes to his nephew, Victor Hale. Caleb stared at her. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. I know. She didn't look away. My lawyers have been fighting it for 12 weeks. Yesterday we lost the final appeal. The clause stands. I have 24 hours to get married, or I lose everything. Why me? Caleb heard himself ask. Why drive all the way out here? Because Victor knows every move I make, every person I talk to, every meeting I take. He has people watching. If I marry someone from my world, someone connected to the business, he'll tear it apart in court. He'll prove it's fake, and I'll lose anyway. She stepped closer. But you're not connected to any of this. You're a rancher who keeps to himself, runs a small operation, stays out of the news. You're exactly the kind of person who would be impossible to discredit. You don't know anything about me. I know you've been trying to save this farm for 3 years. I know the bank holds 2 liens against your property. I know you turned down a buyout offer from Midwest Consolidated last year, even though you probably should have taken it. Her voice softened just slightly. And I know you're the kind of person who doesn't give up on things that matter. Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. You investigated me. I investigated everyone within a 100-mile radius who fit the profile. She didn't apologize for it. You were the best option. For a fake marriage. Yes. He laughed, sharp and bitter. Lady, I don't care how much money you're offering. I'm not offering money. Elena cut him off. If you do this, if you marry me and help me keep control of the company, I'll restructure our acquisition policy. Voss Holdings buys up about 40 small farms a year, places like yours that can't make payments, can't compete with industrial operations. We liquidate them, fold them into larger parcels, and sell to corporate buyers. She met his eyes. I'll stop it. All of it. We'll start a protection program instead. Low interest loans, equipment subsidies, market access for independent farmers. Everything my father should have done but didn't. Caleb's jaw tightened. That's a hell of a campaign promise. It's not a promise. It's what I've wanted to do since I took over. But if Victor gets control, he'll double down on acquisitions. He sees small farmers as inefficient obstacles. He'll crush every independent operation he can find, including yours. She paused. You have 6 months before the bank forecloses. Maybe less. The words hit harder than they should have. Caleb knew his situation, knew it bone deep, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a way he'd been avoiding. Even if I believed you, he said slowly, even if this wasn't completely insane, there's no way this works. Your guy Victor, he's not stupid. He'll see through it. Not if we do it right. Elena pulled out another paper. We get married tomorrow. I move on to the farm. We live together, run the operation together, make it look real. My lawyers can hold off Victor's challenges for about 6 months if we give them something legitimate to work with. After that, once the board confirms my control is stable, we can dissolve the marriage quietly. You go back to your life. I restructure the company. Everyone wins. Except we'd be lying to a lot of people. We'd be protecting something that matters. She didn't flinch. You want to save your farm. I want to save my father's company and use it to do something good. The only lie is the timing. The marriage would be legal. The partnership would be real. What happens after? That's up to us. Caleb looked past her at the field stretching away toward the horizon. 3 generations of riders had worked this land. His grandfather had bought it with money saved from 2 decades of ranch work. His father had expanded it, built the irrigation system, planted the windbreak of cottonwoods along the western edge. Caleb had grown up knowing every acre, every fence line, every stubborn patch of alkali soil that wouldn't grow worth a damn. Losing it would mean losing all of that. Every memory, every promise he'd made to keep it going. If I say yes, he said quietly, I want one condition. Elena waited. No lies between us. He turned back to her. I don't care what we tell everyone else, but if we're doing this, if we're putting our names on legal documents and standing up in front of people, then we're honest with each other about everything. The farm, the company, what we're actually doing here. No games, no manipulation, no bullshit. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe? Or respect. Agreed, she said. I mean it. Caleb stepped closer. This stops being real the second you start playing me. I don't care about your billions or your corporate wars. You lie to me once, we're done. I understand. Elena held out her hand. Do we have a deal? He looked at her hand, suspended in the dusty air between them. This was insane. Completely, objectively insane. Marrying a stranger to save her company, tying himself to corporate battles he didn't understand, risking everything on someone's word. But the alternative was watching the bank auction off his family's land piece by piece. Caleb took her hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike, and when she met his eyes, there was something there that looked almost like relief. We need to leave now, she said. The courthouse closes at 5, and we need to file the license before then if we're doing this tomorrow. Tomorrow? The word felt surreal. Jesus. Okay, let me grab a clean shirt. Each. The courthouse in Alliance was a limestone building that had probably looked impressive 70 years ago. Now it just looked tired, squatting at the end of Main Street like it was waiting for someone to notice it was still there. Elena's phone had been ringing non-stop since they left the farm. She'd ignored it, but Caleb could see the tension building in her shoulders with every buzz. Your people are going to figure out where you are, he said. They already have. She pulled into a parking spot. That's why we need to move fast. Inside, the air conditioning was a relief and a shock. The clerk behind the counter looked up with the expression of someone who'd been doing the same job for 20 years and had stopped being surprised by anything. Help you folks? Marriage license, Elena said. We need to file for tomorrow. The clerk's eyebrows went up slightly. Cutting it close. It's been a busy week. They filled out the paperwork in silence, standing at a high counter with peeling laminate edges. Caleb's hand felt strange holding the pen, forming the letters of his name next to hers. When they were done, the clerk reviewed everything with a thoroughness that seemed designed to test their patience. Everything looks in order, she finally said. There's a mandatory 24-hour waiting period, so the earliest you can have the ceremony is tomorrow after 3:15 p.m. You'll need to come back with an officiant or have one of our judges perform the ceremony. There's a fee for that. We'll bring our own, Elena said, pulling out a credit card. The clerk ran the payment, handed over a receipt, and that was it. Simple, bureaucratic, completely anticlimactic for something that was about to change everything. They walked back out into the heat. I need to make some calls, Elena said. Smooth things over with my legal team, arrange for an officiant, handle the logistics. Can you meet me at the farm tomorrow at 2? It's my farm. I'll be there. Something almost like a smile crossed her face. Right. I'll see you tomorrow then. She got in the SUV and was gone, leaving Caleb standing in the courthouse parking lot, marriage license receipt in his pocket, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. The next day arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. Caleb spent the morning trying to work, but his head wasn't in it. He walked fence lines without seeing them, checked irrigation valves that didn't need checking, and generally accomplished nothing useful. By noon, he gave up and went back to the house to clean up. He was standing in front of his closet, staring at 2 decades worth of work shirts and jeans, when he heard vehicles coming up the drive. Plural. Vehicles. Caleb looked out the window and swore under his breath. The black SUV was back, but it had brought friends. A silver sedan and another SUV, this one white. People were getting out, and none of them looked like they'd ever set foot on a farm before. He walked outside, letting the screen door bang shut behind him. Elena emerged from the first SUV wearing a different blazer but the same sharp expression. Caleb, these are my attorneys, David Chen and Sarah Ortiz. They're here as witnesses. The lawyers nodded, professional and slightly uncomfortable in the dust. A third person got out of the white SUV, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and sensible shoes. Judge Patricia Morrison, Elena said. She's agreed to officiate. On short notice, the judge added, looking around at the farm with interest. This is quite a setting. It's not much, Caleb said. It's honest. The judge smiled. That's something. They gathered on the porch because it was the only place with any shade. The lawyers stood off to one side, witnesses in expensive suits. The judge positioned herself in front of the door, pulled out a small book, and gave Caleb and Elena a long look. I'm required to ask, she said quietly. Are you both entering into this marriage of your own free will? Yes, Elena said. Caleb hesitated for just a second, long enough to feel the weight of it, then nodded. Yes. Then let's begin. The ceremony was brief, painfully brief. The judge read through the legal requirements in a voice that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times. She asked them to face each other, to repeat the vows, to acknowledge the commitment they were making. Caleb heard himself saying the words, felt himself sliding a simple gold band onto Elena's finger, one she'd produced from her pocket without explanation. Watched her do the same for him, her hands steady even though his weren't. By the authority vested in me by the state of Nebraska, Judge Morrison said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. No kiss. Elena had made that clear beforehand. They'd keep the physical aspects minimal, professional. Just the rings. Just the words. But when the judge closed her book and smiled, when the lawyers clapped politely, Caleb felt something settle in his chest that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite dread. They were married. Actually, legally, irreversibly married. Elena turned to him, and for just a moment her careful control slipped. He saw something vulnerable there, something afraid, before she covered it with a smile. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Caleb looked at the lawyers, at the judge, at the cars that would leave soon and take all these witnesses back to their real lives. We haven't gotten to the hard part. The hard part started that evening. The lawyers and the judge left by 4. Elena made phone calls for 2 hours straight, walking circles around the property while she talked in low, urgent tones. Caleb tried to give her space, but the farm wasn't that big. He caught fragments of conversation, reassurances to board members, sharp exchanges with someone named Victor, careful explanations to people whose approval apparently mattered. When she finally finished, the sun was setting and she looked exhausted. I need to go back to the city tonight, she said, finding him near the barn. Handle some immediate fires, make appearances, show that everything's fine. I'll be back tomorrow with my things. Your things. I'm moving in. That was the plan. She studied his face. Unless you've changed your mind. No. Caleb shook his head. No, I guess I didn't think about what that actually means. We'll figure it out. She pulled her keys from her pocket. I'll try not to be too disruptive. After she left, Caleb walked through the house, seeing it through new eyes. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Furniture his grandmother had picked out. Pictures on the walls of people who'd never imagined it would come to this. He ended up on the porch as full dark settled in, listening to the wind move through the wheat fields. Somewhere out there, a coyote called. The stars came out thick and bright, the way they only did when you were far enough from any city lights. Caleb looked down at the ring on his left hand. It caught the porch light, a thin circle of gold that felt heavier than it should. 24 hours ago, he'd been alone, working a failing farm, trying to figure out how to make it to next season. Now he was married to a woman he barely knew, caught up in a corporate war he didn't understand, gambling everything on a promise. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. Made it back. Long day. Thank you again for doing this. E. He stared at it for a while before typing back. We made a deal. I keep my word. The reply came quickly. I'm beginning to see that. Caleb pocketed the phone and stood up. Tomorrow she'd be back, and this thing would really start. Whatever this thing was. A fake marriage that had to look real. A partnership built on necessity. A gamble that could save everything or destroy it. He locked up the house, checked the locks twice like he always did, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Elena arrived the next afternoon in a moving truck, which Caleb hadn't expected. He'd figured maybe a suitcase, some clothes. But she pulled up with a 16-foot rental and a determination that suggested she'd thought this through more carefully than he had. I need this to look legitimate, she explained, opening the back. That means actually living here, not just pretending. The truck was packed efficiently, boxes labeled in neat handwriting, furniture pieces wrapped in blankets, professional equipment he didn't recognize. She'd brought a desk, a laptop setup, filing cabinets, enough business infrastructure to run an office. Where do you want this stuff? Caleb asked. The spare bedroom, if that's all right. I'll need it as a workspace. They spent the afternoon unloading. Elena worked without complaint, hauling boxes in heels until Caleb told her to change into something sensible. She came back in boots and jeans that looked expensive but practical, and he had to admit she didn't slow down. By evening, the spare room had been transformed into something that looked like a satellite office. Desk against the window, computer equipment humming, file boxes stacked with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they contained. I'll need reliable internet, Elena said, surveying the setup. What's your situation? DSL. It's not great. She made a note on her phone. I'll have satellite installed tomorrow. That's expensive. It's necessary. She looked up. I have about 15 video meetings a week. I can't do that on slow DSL. Caleb nodded, filing that away. This was what he'd agreed to. Her work, her world, invading his space. Fair enough. She was letting his work invade hers too. They ordered pizza for dinner because neither of them had the energy to cook. Ate it at the kitchen table in tired silence, grease soaking through paper plates, a bottle of beer sweating between them. So, Caleb finally said, how does this actually work? Day to day, I mean. Elena wiped her hands on a napkin. I need to maintain my normal work schedule, meetings, calls, some travel. But I'll be based here, working from the farm. You keep running your operation like you normally would. When we're in public together, we act like a married couple. When we're here, she paused. We treat each other with respect. That's the deal. What about your guy Victor? When does he make his move? He already has. Elena pulled out her phone, showed him a news article. The headline read, Voss heiress marries Nebraska rancher in surprise wedding. Caleb scanned the article. It was surprisingly neutral, focusing on the facts. Her father's death, the will, the sudden marriage, but the comments below were less kind. Gold digger, he read aloud. They're saying that about both of us, actually. Elena's voice was dry. You're after my money. I'm after legitimacy. According to the internet, we're both terrible people. Are you okay with that? She met his eyes. I've been called worse by better people. What matters is whether you're okay with it. Caleb thought about it. Thought about what people in town would say, what his few remaining friends would think. Then he thought about the farm, about the land his grandfather had died protecting, about whether any of that mattered more than strangers' opinions. I'll manage, he said. Something like approval crossed her face. Good. They finished the pizza. Elena excused herself to make calls, more reassurances, more damage control. Caleb cleaned up, threw out the boxes, tried to make the kitchen look less like a bachelor's half-hearted attempt at domesticity. When he passed the spare room later, he saw her through the open door. She was on a video call, shoulders straight, voice confident and controlled, but her free hand was clenched tight around a pen, knuckles white, and Caleb realized she was as far out of her depth as he was. She'd just gotten better at hiding it. The first week was strange. They established routines without discussing them. Caleb woke at 5, made coffee, went out to work. Elena emerged around 7, took over the kitchen table with her laptop and phone, spent the day in meetings. They passed each other like polite roommates, acknowledging each other with nods and brief exchanges. Morning. Coffee's fresh. Thanks. But the world outside wasn't giving them space to settle in. Victor Hale's response came on day 4. Elena was on a call when Caleb heard her voice change. He looked over from where he was fixing the screen door and saw her face go pale. When? She said sharply. How many outlets? She listened, jaw tight, then ended the call without saying goodbye. What happened? Victor leaked documents to the press. She was already pulling up websites on her laptop, claiming our marriage is fraudulent. He's got tax records, property deeds, everything he needs to build a case that you're financially motivated. Caleb came over, looked at the screen. Sure enough, there it was. Articles on 3 major news sites, all running the same story. Voss marriage under scrutiny. Questions raised about billion-dollar wedding. Nebraska ranchers' convenient union. This is bad, Elena said quietly. Can he prove it? He doesn't have to. He just has to create enough doubt that the board starts questioning my judgment. If they think I manipulated the will's requirements, they can vote to remove me regardless of the marriage's legal status. She stood up, pacing. I need to make a statement. Push back on this before it spirals. What are you going to say? She stopped, looked at him. The truth. That I married you because I needed help, and you were willing to provide it. That we're building something real, even if it started unconventionally. Is that the truth? Caleb asked. I don't know yet. She met his eyes. Is it? Before he could answer, her phone rang again. This time she answered on speaker. Elena? The voice was male, smooth, carrying the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. I hope you saw the morning news. Victor? Her voice went ice cold. Enjoy your moment. It won't last. Won't it? I have a team of investigators looking into your new husband. How long do you think it'll take them to find something? A debt here, a questionable business dealing there. Everyone has secrets, Elena. I'll find his. There's nothing to find. Then you chose poorly. A desperate farmer with a failing operation? Even if he's clean, the optics are terrible. The board already thinks you panicked. This just confirms it. The board answers to shareholders, and the shareholders trust my vision. For now, Victor's tone shifted, became almost friendly. But I'm patient. Every day this marriage looks faker. I get stronger. Every article, every investigation, every doubt, it all works in my favor. You bought yourself time, Elena. You didn't buy yourself a solution. The line went dead. Elena stood there for a moment, phone in hand, and Caleb saw something he hadn't seen before. Not fear exactly, but exhaustion. The bone-deep kind that came from fighting too long with no end in sight. He's not wrong, she said finally. About what? About this looking fake. We're too careful around each other, too polite. If anyone watches us for more than 5 minutes, they'll see it. She turned to him. We need to be more convincing. Meaning we need to actually act like a married couple. In public, around people, even here when we know someone might be watching. She hesitated. I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate, but we need to be comfortable with each other, familiar, the way people are when they actually share a life. Caleb considered that. What do you have in mind? Over the next hour, they talked through it. Small things, Elena explained. Standing closer in public. Casual touches. A hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing when passing something. Learning each other's habits, preferences, the kind of details that came naturally to real couples. We should know basic things about each other, she said. Your coffee order, my work schedule, what we do on weekends, favorite foods, pet peeves. Feels like homework. It is homework. Victor's going to send people to watch us, ask around town, look for inconsistencies. We need to have our story straight. So they did homework. Sat at the kitchen table, like students cramming for a test, trading information. Elena took her coffee black, hated mornings, worked until midnight when left to her own devices. She'd grown up in Chicago, boarding schools and country clubs, with a father who built empires and a mother who'd left when Elena was 12. No siblings, no close friends, really, just professional relationships and carefully maintained boundaries. Caleb learned she had a scar on her left hand from a childhood accident with a fence post, that she spoke 3 languages but struggled with small talk, that she'd wanted to be a veterinarian before her father convinced her the business needed her more. In return, he told her about growing up on the farm, about losing his father to a heart attack when Caleb was 19 and learning to run the place alone, about his mother remarrying and moving to Arizona, about the slow decline of small farming and the weight of carrying his family's legacy. You never thought about selling, Elena asked, before things got this bad? Every day. Caleb leaned back in his chair. But then I'd walk the property and remember my grandfather teaching me to drive the tractor, or my dad showing me how to read the soil. All that history. I couldn't just walk away from it. Even if staying means losing it anyway? Even then, he met her eyes. Some things you fight for until there's nothing left to fight with. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I understand that. They worked until late, building their cover story, getting their details straight. By the time they called it a night, Caleb's head was full of information about a woman he'd married but barely knew. As he lay in bed that night, he could hear her moving around in the spare room, the soft click of keyboard keys, the low murmur of her voice on another call. The sounds of someone who didn't sleep much, someone who worked until exhaustion forced her to stop. Someone, Caleb was starting to realize, who might be as alone in this as he was. The first real test came on Saturday morning, when Caleb's neighbor, Tom Henderson, showed up unannounced. Caleb was out by the equipment shed when he heard the truck, and his stomach dropped. Tom had farmed the adjacent property for 40 years, knew everything that happened within a 10-mile radius, and wasn't shy about sharing opinions. "Company," Caleb called toward the house. Elena appeared in his doorway, still in pajama pants and one of his old work shirts she'd borrowed. Her hair was loose, uncombed, and she looked more human than he'd ever seen her. "Who is it?" she asked. "Neighbor. He's going to want to meet you." She straightened slightly, some of that boardroom composure sliding back into place, but Caleb shook his head. "Don't. Just be normal, like you just woke up." Tom's truck pulled to a stop, and the older man climbed out with the stiffness of someone whose back had given up on him years ago. He was carrying a covered dish. "Heard you got married," Tom called out, his weathered face splitting into a grin. "Wife made you a casserole, figured you two might need some proper food." "Tom, this is Elena." Caleb moved toward them, trying to figure out how to play this. "Elena, Tom Henderson, farms the property east of here." Elena came down the porch steps barefoot and extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you." Tom shook it, studying her with the frank curiosity of someone who'd lived long enough to stop pretending he wasn't curious. "City girl, huh?" "Chicago," Elena confirmed. "Long way from home." "This is home now." She said it easily, but Caleb caught the slight tension in her shoulders. Tom handed over the casserole. "Wife wanted me to tell you there's a church potluck next Sunday if you want to come. Good way to meet folks." "We'll think about it," Caleb said, knowing they wouldn't. The fewer people they had to perform for, the better. But Tom wasn't done. He looked between them, that measuring gaze taking in details Caleb suddenly became aware of. The shirt Elena was wearing, the way she stood close enough to suggest comfort, the wedding bands they both wore. "Quick courtship," Tom said finally. "When you know, you know." Elena's voice was light, but there was steel underneath. "Caleb showed me the property last spring when I was researching agricultural operations in the region. We stayed in touch. Things developed from there. It was a good lie. Simple, plausible, harder to disprove. Caleb made a mental note to remember it. Tom nodded slowly. Well, congratulations to you both. Let me know if you need anything. We're just over the hill. After he left, Elena set the casserole on the porch railing and let out a long breath. How'd I do? She asked. Good. The backstory was smart. I've been working on it. Thought we might need something more detailed than we got married fast. She looked at him. Does everyone around here just drop by whenever they want? Pretty much. That's going to be a problem. She was right. Over the next week, they had 4 more visitors. Neighbors with questions, a reporter from the local paper wanting a human interest story, even the pastor from Tom's church extending a personal invitation. Each time, Caleb and Elena had to perform, had to be a couple instead of 2 people circling each other in careful politeness. It got easier. Or maybe they just got better at faking it. Elena learned to lean against him when people were watching, to laugh at his dry observations, to touch his arm when making a point. Caleb found himself responding in kind, a hand at the small of her back when guiding her through a doorway, standing close enough that their shoulders brushed, meeting her eyes when she spoke like what she was saying actually mattered. The scary part was how natural it started to feel. By the second week, the media attention intensified. More articles appeared, each one digging deeper into their backgrounds. Someone found Caleb's high school yearbook photo and ran it next to a picture of Elena at some charity gala, highlighting the contrast. From different worlds, the headline read. They're not wrong, Caleb muttered, reading it over breakfast. Elena glanced up from her laptop. Does it bother you? Being called a gold digger in print? Yeah, it bothers me. I'm sorry. She closed the laptop. I knew there would be scrutiny, but I didn't think they'd be this aggressive about it. Victor's pushing it. Probably. She rubbed her eyes, and Caleb noticed the dark circles that makeup wasn't quite covering anymore. His legal team filed a formal challenge yesterday, claiming the marriage violates the spirit of the will's intent, even if it's technically legal. Can they do that? They can try. My lawyers say it's a weak argument, but it'll drag out for months. More hearings, more depositions, more opportunities for Victor to find something he can use against us. She stood up, carrying her coffee to the window. In the meantime, I have a board meeting next week, in Chicago. I need to go back for a few days. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. How long? 3 days? Maybe 4? I can do most of my work remotely, but this meeting is crucial. I need to reassure the board that everything's stable, that the marriage is legitimate, that I'm still capable of running the company. She turned to face him. You should come with me. To Chicago? To the meeting. Well, not to the actual meeting, but to Chicago. It would help if they saw us together, if you were there when I needed support. It makes the marriage look more real. Caleb thought about leaving the farm for 4 days. Thought about the work that would pile up, the irrigation schedule he'd have to adjust, the 100 small tasks that kept the place running. Then he thought about their deal and what he'd agreed to. Okay, he said. When do we leave? They flew out on Monday morning from a small regional airport 2 hours away. Elena had arranged everything, tickets, hotel, a car service to pick them up. Caleb had never been on a plane before, but he didn't admit that until they were boarding. First time? Elena asked, catching his hesitation at the door. That obvious? Only to someone who's looking. She guided him to their seats, first class, which felt absurd. Window or aisle? Window. She let him have it without comment, and when the plane took off, Caleb gripped the armrest hard enough that his knuckles went white. Elena didn't say anything, just reached over and covered his hand with hers. The touch was brief, practical, probably meant to be reassuring. It worked anyway. Chicago hit him like a physical thing. The noise, the crowds, the sheer density of buildings and people and movement. Elena navigated it like she was born to it, which, Caleb supposed, she was. She led him through O'Hare with the confidence of someone who'd made this trip 1,000 times, got them into a black car that smelled like leather and money, and gave the driver an address in a voice that expected to be obeyed. The hotel was downtown, all glass and steel and understated wealth. Their room was on the 43rd floor with a view of the lake that probably cost more per night than Caleb's truck payment. This is too much, he said, standing at the window. Elena was unpacking her suitcase with efficient movements. The company's paying for it, and we need to maintain appearances. If I show up with my new husband staying at a budget motel, it raises questions. Still feels wrong. Get used to it. This is my world. She hung up a dress, smoothed out invisible wrinkles. The board dinner is tomorrow night. You'll need to come to that. I don't have anything to wear to a board dinner. I know. That's why we're going shopping this afternoon. Caleb turned from the window. Elena, don't argue. You need a suit, and we don't have time to debate it. This is part of the deal. Looking the part when we need to. Her tone softened slightly. I'm not trying to change you, but these people judge on appearance. I need you to look like someone they can respect. So they went shopping. Elena took him to a store where everything was displayed like art, and the salespeople looked at him like they were calculating his net worth. She picked out suits with an efficiency that suggested she'd done this before, vetoing his objections with calm certainty. This one, she said, holding up a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. That's insane. It fits you. Try it on. He did, and hated how right she was. The suit transformed him into someone he didn't recognize, someone who looked like he belonged in Elena's world instead of chest-deep in irrigation ditches. We'll take it, Elena told the salesman, and 2 dress shirts, 1 tie. In the changing room afterward, Caleb stared at himself in the mirror. The stranger looking back at him had the same face, same calloused hands, but wore clothes that cost more than a month's worth of feed. This isn't me, he said when he came out. Elena was waiting by the register, credit card already out. It's a version of you, the version that makes this work. She met his eyes. I know it's uncomfortable, but you're doing this for the farm, remember? Sometimes we have to be people we're not to protect the things that matter. The words sat heavy in his chest all afternoon. That evening, they had dinner at a restaurant where the menu didn't list prices, and the portions were designed to make you wonder if you'd actually ordered food. Elena was different here, sharper, more guarded, her eyes constantly scanning the room for people who might recognize her. Relax, Caleb said quietly. You look like you're waiting for an ambush. I am. Half the people in this room either work for the company or have investments tied to it. I can't afford to look weak. She took a sip of wine. Victor will have people here, watching, listening, reporting back. How do you live like this? Practice. But something in her voice suggested it wasn't as easy as she made it sound. Later, back in the hotel room, they navigated the awkwardness of sharing space. Elena took the bathroom first, emerged in pajamas that were somehow both modest and expensive. Caleb changed in the bathroom, and when he came out, she was already in bed, laptop open, working. There's only one bed, he said, stating the obvious. I know, we're married. Separate rooms would raise questions. She didn't look up from the screen. I'll stay on my side. You stay on yours. It'll be fine. It wasn't fine. Caleb lay on his half of the king-sized bed, acutely aware of her presence 3 feet away. She worked for another hour, the blue light from her screen casting shadows across her face. When she finally closed the laptop and turned off the light, the darkness felt somehow more intimate than the light had been. Caleb? Her voice came through the dark. Yeah? Thank you for doing this, coming here. I know it's not easy. Neither is what you're doing. He stared at the ceiling, barely visible in the ambient light from the city outside. Moving to the farm, giving up your life. I haven't given it up. I've just relocated it. A pause. Is it working? The act, I mean. Do we seem like a real couple? He thought about her hand on his during takeoff. The easy way she'd touched his arm at dinner. The small performances they'd been giving for 2 weeks now. I think so, he said. Sometimes it feels real, even to me. She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, yeah, sometimes it does. The board dinner the next night was everything Caleb had dreaded. 23 people in evening wear, gathered in a private room at a restaurant that made last night's place look casual. Elena introduced him to each one, and Caleb shook hands and smiled and tried to remember names he'd forget in 10 minutes. Victor Hale arrived fashionably late. Caleb recognized him immediately, not from pictures, but from the way Elena's shoulders went rigid when he entered the room. Victor was in his 50s, silver-haired and handsome in the way men with money and power often were. He worked the room like a politician, all charm and confidence. When he reached them, his smile never wavered. Elena, So good to see you. He kissed her cheek like they were old friends. And this must be the famous Caleb Ryder. Caleb shook his hand, noting the grip that tried just a little too hard to assert dominance. Mr. Hale? Victor, please. We're family now, after all. His eyes were cold despite the warm tone. I have to say, I was surprised by the news. Elena's always been so focused on work. I never imagined she'd make time for romance. Sometimes the right person makes you rethink your priorities, Elena said smoothly. How true. Victor's gaze shifted to Caleb. And you're a rancher, I understand. Cattle. Wheat, mostly, some corn. Fascinating. I've always admired people who work with their hands. There's something so authentic about it. The way he said authentic made it sound like an insult. You must find the corporate world quite different from farm life. Different, Caleb agreed. But people are people. Doesn't matter if you're negotiating grain prices or stock prices. Everyone's looking out for their own interests. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. Indeed. Well, I hope you're looking out for Elena's interests. She's taken quite a risk marrying so quickly. We both have, Caleb said quietly. That's what marriage is. A risk you take together. Elena's hand found his, fingers interlacing. Caleb understands what matters to me. That's more than I can say for some people. The barb landed. Victor's smile tightened fractionally. Of course. I wish you both every happiness, though I have to wonder. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. How long can happiness last when it's built on convenience rather than foundation? Longer than empires built on ambition and greed, Elena replied. Her voice was light, but her grip on Caleb's hand had gone tight enough to hurt. Victor laughed like she'd made a joke. Touché. Enjoy the evening, you two. He moved away, and Caleb felt Elena exhale slowly. That went well, she murmured. He's going to be a problem. He already is. Dinner was a performance. Caleb sat beside Elena, playing the supportive husband while conversations about quarterly reports and market projections swirled around him. He understood maybe half of it, but he paid attention anyway, watching the dynamics. Victor held court at the other end of the table, making points that sounded reasonable but always carried an edge. Several board members clearly favored him, older men who kept glancing at Caleb like he was a stain on the tablecloth. But others seemed genuinely happy for Elena. A woman named Patricia congratulated them warmly. A younger man asked Caleb about farming with what sounded like real interest. The board wasn't unified, which Caleb figured was probably the only thing keeping Elena in the game. After dinner, there were drinks in an adjoining room. Caleb nursed a bourbon and tried to look comfortable while Elena worked the room. She was good at it, laughing at the right moments, steering conversations with subtle skill, making each person feel like they had her full attention. You look lost. Caleb turned to find Patricia beside him. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed and direct. Little bit, he admitted. This isn't your world. No, ma'am. But you married into it anyway. She studied him over her wine glass. That takes either courage or foolishness. I'm trying to figure out which. Caleb met her gaze. Maybe both. That got a smile. I like you. You're different from the usual parasites who circle money. She gestured toward Victor, who was laughing with a cluster of board members. That one's been waiting for this opportunity his whole life. He thinks he deserves the company because of his last name. Does he? Deserve it? No. But he wants it bad enough to fight dirty for it. Be careful, Mr. Ryder. Victor doesn't lose gracefully. I'm starting to figure that out. Patricia patted his arm. Take care of her. Elena acts tough, but she's carrying a lot. Her father's death hit her harder than she lets on, and this whole situation? She shook her head. Just take care of her. I will. The words came out automatically, part of the performance. But watching Elena across the room, shoulders straight, smile fixed, fighting a battle she couldn't afford to lose, Caleb felt the weight of the promise. They left the dinner after midnight, both exhausted. In the car back to the hotel, Elena kicked off her heels and leaned her head against the window. That was awful, she said. You did good. I did what I had to do. There's a difference. She closed her eyes. Patricia likes you. That's good. She's influential with the other board members. If she thinks you're legitimate, it carries weight. She also warned me about Victor. She's right to. He's going to escalate. Elena opened her eyes, staring out at the city lights. I could see it in his face tonight. He thought you'd be easy to intimidate, easy to expose, but you held your ground. I just answered his questions. You stood up to him. That's more than most people do. She turned to look at Caleb. Thank you for coming here, for dealing with all of this. I know it's not what you signed up for. Neither is any of it. Caleb shifted in his seat. But we made a deal. I keep my word. Back in the hotel room, they fell into bed without the awkwardness of the previous night. Exhaustion trumped discomfort. Caleb was asleep within minutes, too tired to care about the strangeness of sharing a bed with someone who was technically his wife, but practically a stranger. He woke sometime in the early hours to find Elena sitting up in bed, laptop open again, working. The clock on the nightstand read 3:47 a.m. You're going to burn out, he said, voice rough with sleep. She jumped slightly. Sorry. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't, but you need to sleep. I will. Just need to finish this report for tomorrow's meeting. Caleb sat up, rubbing his face. Elena, when's the last time you slept a full night? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. You're running on fumes, he said. I've seen it before, people pushing too hard, thinking they can muscle through on willpower alone. It doesn't work. You crash eventually. I don't have time to crash. You don't have a choice. Your body's going to make the decision for you if you keep this up. He reached over, gently closed her laptop. Whatever you're working on can wait 6 hours. You don't understand. I understand you're going to make mistakes if you're exhausted. Bad decisions that'll cost you more than a few hours of sleep. He set the laptop on the nightstand. I've been up for 72 hours straight during harvest. I know what it does to your judgment. Please, just rest. Elena looked at him for a long moment. In the dim light from the city outside, she looked younger than her 32 years, vulnerable in a way she never let herself be during the day. I'm scared, she said quietly. If I stop, if I let my guard down even for a second, Victor wins. He takes everything my father built, everything I've worked for, and he burns it down out of spite. Then we don't let him win. Caleb kept his voice steady. But you can't fight him if you're falling apart. Get some sleep. You'll be sharper tomorrow. She nodded slowly, then lay back down, but she didn't close her eyes. Caleb? Yeah? Do you think we can actually pull this off? Make everyone believe this is real? He thought about the past 2 weeks, the performances, the touches, the moments when the act had felt uncomfortably close to truth. I think we're already pulling it off, he said. The question is how long we can keep it up. Elena was quiet. Then, what if we didn't have to keep it up? What if it just was? Caleb's breath caught. What are you saying? I don't know. She sounded as confused as he felt. Sometimes it doesn't feel like pretending anymore. And I don't know if that's good or dangerous or just exhaustion talking. He should have had an answer for that. Should have reminded her this was temporary, that they had an endgame, that getting emotionally tangled would only make things harder. Instead, he said, I know what you mean. They lay there in the dark, not touching, but aware of each other in a way that went beyond the physical space between them. Eventually, Elena's breathing evened out and she slept. Caleb stayed awake longer, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell they were doing. The board meeting the next day was closed to outsiders, so Caleb spent the morning walking Chicago. He wandered through Millennium Park, stared at the weird metal bean sculpture, drank overpriced coffee, and watched people rush past with the urgency of those who had somewhere important to be. His phone buzzed around noon. Elena, meeting's going long. Might be another few hours. You okay? He typed back, fine, take your time. But he wasn't fine. Being in the city made him itchy, restless. Too many people, too much noise, air that smelled like exhaust and lake water instead of wheat and dirt. He missed the farm with an intensity that surprised him, missed the open sky, the quiet, the work that made sense. Another message. Victor's making his move. Formal challenge to the marriage's legitimacy. Board's voting whether to open an investigation. Caleb's chest tightened. What do you need from me? Nothing. Just wanted you to know. I'll handle it. He almost called her. Almost said forget the performance, forget the politics. Just tell them the truth and let the chips fall. But that wasn't the deal. The deal was seeing this through, fighting until there was nothing left to fight with. So he waited. Elena emerged from the building after 6, looking wrung out but standing straight. Caleb was waiting by the car, and when she saw him, something in her expression cracked. They voted to investigate, she said. 8-7. They're sending a team to interview us, review our finances, look for evidence of fraud. When? Soon, maybe 2 weeks. She got in the car, and Caleb slid in beside her. If they find anything, any hint that this marriage is fake, I lose everything. The company, my position, probably any credibility I have left in the industry. Then they won't find anything. She looked at him. How can you be so sure? Because the marriage is legal. We live together. We're building something, even if it started unconventional. He held her gaze. And because we're not going to give them a reason to doubt it. Something shifted in her eyes. You really mean that? I keep my word. You know that by now. The flight back to Nebraska the next morning felt different. Elena was quieter, more withdrawn. She stared out the window during takeoff, and when Caleb reached for her hand the way she'd done for him, she let him take it. They didn't talk about what it meant. Back at the farm, reality reasserted itself quickly. Caleb had messages from the irrigation company about a broken valve, bills that needed paying, work that had piled up in his absence. Elena disappeared into her office, back on calls within an hour of getting home. But that night at dinner, takeout Chinese eaten at the kitchen table because neither of them had energy to cook, Elena set down her fork and looked at him. I'm sorry, she said. For what? For dragging you into this. The investigation, Victor's attacks, all of it. You didn't sign up for this level of scrutiny. Neither did you. Caleb pushed fried rice around his plate. Your father put you in an impossible position. That will, the conditions. It's not fair to make you choose between marriage and your life's work. He was trying to protect me, I think, in his own twisted way. He thought I needed someone, that I was too isolated. She smiled without humor. Turns out he wasn't wrong. I just wish he'd trusted me to figure it out on my own timeline. You miss him. Every day. Her voice went quiet. He was difficult, demanding, never satisfied. But he was my father, and now he's gone, and I'm trying to honor what he built while also fixing everything he did wrong. It's exhausting. Caleb reached across the table, covered her hand with his. The gesture was becoming familiar. Less performance, more instinct. You're doing good work, he said. The farm protection program, the changes you're making to acquisition policies, that matters. If I can hold on to the company long enough to implement them, you will. She turned her hand over, lacing their fingers together. You keep saying that, like you actually believe it. I do. Why? Because I've seen you fight. I've watched you handle board members and reporters and Victor's bullshit without breaking. You're tougher than you think you are. He squeezed her hand gently. And because you're not doing this alone anymore. That was the deal, remember? We're in this together. Elena's eyes were bright in the kitchen light, and for a moment Caleb thought she might cry. But she didn't, just held his hand and nodded. Together, she repeated. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. Later, as Caleb was washing dishes, Elena came up beside him with a dish towel. I can dry, she said. You don't have to. I know, but this is my home now too. Might as well act like it. So they washed and dried dishes together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with an ease that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. And when they were done, when the counters were clean and the lights were off, and they were headed to their separate rooms, Elena paused in the hallway. Caleb? He turned back. I'm glad you're the one I asked, she said. I mean it. Of all the options, all the people I could have approached, I'm glad it was you. Before he could respond, she disappeared into her room, door clicking shut behind her. Caleb stood in the dark hallway, her words echoing in his head, and realized with uncomfortable clarity that he was glad too. That was the moment he knew they were in trouble. The trouble started small, the way trouble usually does. 3 days after they got back from Chicago, Caleb noticed the irrigation system in the North Field wasn't running right. The pressure was off, water pooling in spots that should have been dry, while other sections got nothing. He spent the morning tracing lines, checking valves, trying to find the problem. When he finally located it, his stomach went cold. Someone had cut the main feed line. Not broken, cut. Clean slice through heavy-duty plastic, deliberate and precise. The kind of damage that didn't happen by accident. Caleb stood there in the mud, staring at the severed pipe, and felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't corporate warfare anymore. This was personal. He called Elena. She answered on the second ring, sounding distracted. "The irrigation's been sabotaged," he said without preamble. The background noise on her end went quiet. "What?" "Someone cut the main line, probably last night." He knelt down, examining the edges. "This is professional work. They knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage." "How bad?" "Bad enough. I can fix it, but I've already lost a day's watering. In this heat, that could cost me yield." He straightened up, scanning the empty fields around him. "Elena, this is Victor." "You don't know that." "Who else would it be? He's escalating. First the media attacks, then the legal challenges, now this." She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had gone hard. "I'll make some calls, put pressure on him through the board, let him know we're not backing down." "That's not going to stop him." "Then what do you suggest?" Caleb looked at the cut pipe, at the wasted water soaking into ground that was already struggling. "I suggest we stop pretending this is just business. Victor's playing dirty. Maybe it's time we did too." "What does that mean?" "It means we give him something real to worry about. Right now he thinks we're faking this marriage, that it's just a legal arrangement we'll dissolve when convenient. So we prove him wrong. We make it so real, so solid that there's no way he can challenge it without looking like a fool." "Caleb, I'm serious. We stop holding back, stop keeping distance. We act like an actual married couple, not two people sharing a house." He started walking back toward the truck, mud sucking at his boots. "If investigators come here and find us living like roommates, they'll know. But if they find a real partnership, real life together, what's Victor going to say then?" Elena exhaled slowly. "You're talking about changing the fundamental nature of our arrangement. I'm talking about survival. You said it yourself in Chicago. Sometimes we have to be people we're not to protect what matters. Well, maybe we need to be a married couple. Actually be one, not just play at it. And after, when this is over?" That was the question, wasn't it? Caleb didn't have an answer, wasn't sure he wanted to think about it. "We'll figure it out," he said. "But right now we need to focus on making it through the investigation. Everything else is secondary." She agreed to think about it. Caleb spent the rest of the day fixing the irrigation line, sweating through his shirt, hands black with mud and frustration. By the time he got back to the house, it was past 7 and he was exhausted. Elena was in the kitchen, actually cooking. The sight stopped him in the doorway. "You cook?" he asked. "I can follow a recipe." She gestured at the stove where something was simmering. "Pasta. Nothing fancy, but I figured we should eat something that isn't takeout." Caleb washed up at the sink, scrubbing mud from under his fingernails. "I've been thinking about what you said," Elena continued, not looking at him, "about making this more real. You're right. We've been too careful, too separate. If we want this to work, we need to actually share a life." "Meaning?" "Meaning we stop sleeping in separate rooms. We combine our routines, our spaces. We stop acting like roommates and start acting like partners." She turned off the stove, faced him. "But we need rules. Boundaries we both agree to." "Like what?" "Like we're honest with each other about what this is and isn't. We don't pretend we're in love, but we don't treat it like a business arrangement either. We build something real, whatever that looks like. But we remember why we're doing this." Caleb leaned against the counter. "And when the investigation's over? When the board confirms your position and Victor backs off? Then we reevaluate, see where we actually stand." She met his eyes. "But we give it 6 months. Real effort, real partnership. After that, if either of us wants out, we end it cleanly. No hard feelings, no regrets." 6 months. 6 months. It should have felt like more time. Instead, it felt impossibly short. "Okay," Caleb said. 6 months of being actually married. Let's do it." They ate dinner at the kitchen table, and the conversation was different this time. Less careful, more honest. Elena told him about her first board meeting, how terrified she'd been that the older men would see through her, dismiss her as her father's indulged daughter. Caleb talked about the first harvest after his father died, how he'd made every mistake possible and still somehow brought in enough wheat to keep the bank at bay. You miss him, Elena said. Your father. Every day, even though we fought like hell sometimes. Caleb pushed pasta around his plate. He had this idea of what the farm should be, what I should be. I didn't always agree, but I respected what he built. That's how I feel about my father. The company was his whole life. He sacrificed everything for it. His marriage, his relationship with me, his health. And then he died and left me holding all of it, trying to figure out if I'm supposed to honor his vision or fix his mistakes.
Maybe both. Maybe. She smiled slightly. He would have hated this, me marrying a rancher from Nebraska. He thought I should marry someone from our world, another executive, someone who understood the business. Victor? He suggested it once, years ago, when Victor and I were both younger and less damaged. She shook her head. I told him I'd rather run the company into the ground than tie myself to Victor Hale. Smart woman. Stubborn woman. There's a difference.
After dinner, they moved Elena's things from the spare room into Caleb's bedroom. It felt strange, intimate in a way their courthouse wedding hadn't been. Her clothes next to his in the closet, her toiletries in the bathroom, her laptop on the nightstand beside his alarm clock. This is weird, Elena said, hanging up a dress. Yeah, but necessary. Yeah. They worked in silence until everything was moved. The spare room looked empty now, just a desk and file boxes. The bedroom looked lived in, shared, real. That night they lay in bed with the lights off, the darkness heavy between them. Caleb? Elena's voice was soft. Yeah? Thank you for not making this harder than it has to be. Same to you. She shifted and he felt the mattress move. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why haven't you dated anyone? Tom mentioned you've been single for years. Caleb stared at the ceiling. Farm keeps me busy, and most people don't want this life. The work, the uncertainty, the isolation. Easier to stay single than try to explain why I can't leave for a weekend or why I'm up at 5 every morning. That sounds lonely. It is, but it's honest. He turned his head toward her, though he could barely see her in the dark. What about you? Beautiful woman running a billion-dollar company. You must have had options. Options, yes. Good options, no. Most men either wanted my money or were intimidated by it. The few who weren't, she paused. I couldn't trust their motivations. Couldn't be sure they wanted me or what I represented. And now you're married to a guy who definitely wants something from you. True, but at least you're honest about it. There was a smile in her voice. And you haven't asked me for money once. That's refreshing. Give it time. I might develop expensive tastes. She laughed, quiet and genuine, and Caleb felt something warm settle in his chest. They fell asleep like that, talking in the dark like teenagers at a sleepover. And when Caleb woke in the early hours, he found Elena curled on her side facing him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. He didn't move away. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Caleb was out checking the repaired irrigation line when his phone rang. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. Mr. Ryder, this is Amanda Pierce from the Board Investigation Committee. I'm calling to inform you that we'll be conducting interviews at your residence starting this Friday. We'll need to speak with both you and Mrs. Voss, tour the property, and review relevant documentation. Caleb's grip tightened on the phone. Friday. That's 3 days from now. Yes, I understand it's short notice, but the board felt it was important to move quickly given the nature of the allegations. Her voice was professional, detached. We'll arrive at 9 a.m. Please ensure both you and Mrs. Voss are available for the full day. After she hung up, Caleb stood in the field for a long moment, staring at nothing. 3 days to make their marriage look real enough to survive investigation. 3 days to build a life that could withstand scrutiny. He called Elena. They're coming Friday, he said. I know. Amanda just called me too. She sounded tense. We need to prepare. Make sure everything looks right, sounds right. They're going to ask hard questions. Then we better have good answers. They spent the next 3 days building their cover story into something bulletproof. Sat at the kitchen table like students studying for the most important test of their lives, going over every detail of how they'd met, when they'd fallen in love, why they'd married so quickly. We need a moment, Elena said Wednesday evening. Something specific we can point to when they ask when we knew. Knew what? That this was real. That we wanted to be together. She tapped her pen against her notebook. Every couple has that moment. We need one too. Caleb thought about it. About the night she'd first arrived, dust on her expensive heels, desperation hidden behind corporate composure. About standing in the courthouse, sliding a ring onto her finger and feeling the weight of the promise. About Chicago, her hand in his during takeoff. The night we got back from Chicago, he said slowly, we did dishes together. You said this was your home now too, that you wanted to act like it. That's when I knew. Elena looked up at him. Knew what? That maybe this could be more than a deal, that maybe we could actually build something. He held her gaze. What about you? She was quiet for a moment. When you closed my laptop at 3 a.m. and told me I needed to sleep. No one's ever... She stopped, started again. No one's ever cared about my well-being more than what I could do for them. You did. That mattered. They wrote it down, made it part of their story, and if it felt a little too true, a little too close to something neither of them wanted to examine, they didn't mention it. Thursday night, they stayed up late going over everything one more time. Financial records that showed combined accounts. Elena had moved money into Caleb's farm operation, making it look like a genuine merger of resources. Photos they'd staged over the past weeks, casual shots that suggested a relationship that existed before the wedding. Text messages between them, carefully curated to show affection and familiarity. This is insane, Caleb said, looking at the pile of evidence they'd assembled. We're literally manufacturing a relationship. We're protecting ourselves, Elena corrected. Victor manufactured this situation. We're just responding to it. By lying to investigators. By showing them a version of the truth they can accept. She closed the folder of documents. Caleb, if we tell them the real story, that I showed up desperate and you agreed to help, they'll see exactly what Victor wants them to see. A fake marriage, a fraud. But if we show them two people who found each other in an unconventional way and made it work, that's different. That's human. Is it though? Human? He gestured at the evidence spread across the table. Or are we just good at performing? Elena's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through. I don't know anymore, and that scares me. Before Caleb could respond, headlights swept across the front window, a vehicle coming up the drive, too late for neighborly visits. They both stood, moving to the window. A dark sedan, unfamiliar, rolling to a stop near the house. You expecting anyone? Caleb asked. No. The driver's door opened. A man got out, 40-ish and solid, moving with the careful awareness of someone trained for trouble. He walked to the porch, knocked twice. Caleb opened the door. Can I help you? Caleb Ryder? The man's voice was neutral, professional. That's me. I'm here to deliver a message from Victor Hale. He held out a manila envelope. He wanted you to have this before the investigation tomorrow. Caleb took it, feeling the weight of paper inside. What is it? Evidence. Of a different kind than what you've been preparing. The man's eyes flicked to Elena, standing behind Caleb. Mr. Hale wanted you to know he has documentation of Mrs. Voss's visit to your property before the marriage. Security footage, GPS records from her vehicle, even a signed affidavit from a court clerk who remembers you two filing for the license the same day you met. Elena's face went pale. He's been building this case for weeks, the man continued. Tomorrow, when the investigators arrive, he's going to present them with a timeline that proves this marriage was arranged, not organic. Every text message, every public appearance, every staged photo. He'll show them it was all constructed after the fact. Caleb's hands clenched around the envelope. Why are you telling us this? Professional courtesy. Mr. Hale believes in giving people a chance to surrender with dignity. He's willing to offer Mrs. Voss a settlement. She steps down from the company, accepts a generous buyout, and he drops all challenges to the marriage. You two can stay together, keep your farm, and avoid the embarrassment of a public investigation. Get off my property, Caleb said quietly. The man raised his hands, just delivering a message. Message delivered, now leave. After he drove away, Caleb and Elena stood in the doorway, the envelope between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. He knows everything, Elena said finally. The timeline, the courthouse, all of it. We can't fight this. The hell we can't. Caleb, be realistic. If he has footage of me arriving here that first day, then we tell the truth. Caleb turned to face her. Not the sanitized version we've been practicing. The real truth. You came here desperate. I agreed to help. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being fake. We tell them that. They'll never believe it. Why not? It's what happened. He took her hands, and they were shaking. Elena, we've been so focused on building a cover story that we forgot the actual story is pretty good. You needed help. I needed to save my farm. We made a deal, and then we made it real. That's not fraud. That's just two people trying to survive. But the timing, screw the timing. People fall in love fast when circumstances push them together. Soldiers, disaster survivors, people thrown into impossible situations. It happens all the time. We're not the first couple to build a relationship under pressure. Elena searched his face. You really believe we can convince them? I believe we're stronger together than Victor is alone. And I believe our story, the real one, is more believable than whatever manufactured outrage he's selling. Caleb squeezed her hands. But we have to commit. No more half-truths, no more performance. Tomorrow when those investigators arrive, we tell them everything and let them decide. She nodded slowly. Okay, the truth. All of it. They went to bed that night without going over their notes one more time, without rehearsing answers or staging photo opportunities. Just climbed into bed exhausted, emotionally wrung out, and lay there in the dark. I'm terrified, Elena whispered. Me too. What if this doesn't work? What if we lose everything? Caleb rolled onto his side, found her hand in the darkness. Then we lose it trying. That's all we can do. She interlaced her fingers with his, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world spinning out of control. And maybe he was. Maybe they both were. Two people clinging to each other in a storm neither of them had asked for. Caleb? Yeah? I'm glad it's you. I know I said that before, but I mean it even more now. If I had to go through this with anyone, I'm glad it's you. He pulled her closer, felt her curve into him, head tucked under his chin. Same here. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Caleb didn't question whether they were performing or being real. It felt real. That was enough. Friday morning arrived too fast and too bright. Caleb woke to find Elena already up, standing at the bedroom window in one of his old t-shirts, staring out at the fields. They'll be here in 2 hours, she said without turning around. I know. I keep thinking about what that man said, about Victor having evidence, documentation, proof that this was arranged. Caleb got out of bed, moved to stand beside her. He probably does. But here's the thing. It being arranged doesn't make it fake. We did arrange this. We were honest about that from the start, at least with each other. The question isn't whether we had practical reasons for getting married. It's whether those practical reasons are the only reasons we're still married. And what's the answer to that? He looked at her, hair uncombed, face bare of makeup, wearing his clothes in the morning light. She looked nothing like the woman who'd stepped out of that black SUV 5 weeks ago. Or maybe she looked exactly like that woman, just without the armor. I think the answer is no, he said quietly. The practical reasons aren't the only ones anymore. Elena turned to face him. When did that happen? I don't know. Somewhere between doing dishes and going to Chicago and you falling asleep holding my hand, it just happened. That's not very romantic. No, but it's true. She smiled, small and uncertain. The investigators are going to ask if we love each other. Probably. What are you going to say? Caleb thought about it, about love and what it meant, and whether 5 weeks was enough time to know. I'm going to say I'm learning to, that it's happening slower than movies suggest and messier than I expected, but it's happening. Is that enough? It might be. Elena stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her gray eyes. Because I think I'm going to say the same thing. They stood there for a moment, suspended in something that felt bigger than either of them. Then Elena's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. They're early, she said, checking the message. 15 minutes out. They got dressed quickly, Caleb in clean jeans and a button-down, Elena in slacks and a simple blouse. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual. Just two people getting ready for a day that would determine their future. The investigators arrived in 2 vehicles. Amanda Pierce led the team, late 40s, sharp-eyed, carrying a briefcase that suggested she'd come prepared. With her was a younger man introduced as Daniel Chen, an attorney, and a woman named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, described as a behavioral specialist. "Thank you for accommodating us on short notice," Amanda said as they settled in the living room. "This shouldn't take more than a few hours. We'll need to interview you separately, tour the property, and review some documentation." "Whatever you need," Elena said. She was sitting beside Caleb on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. Amanda pulled out a tablet. "Let's start with the basics. How did you two meet?" Caleb and Elena exchanged a glance. This was it. Truth or comfortable fiction? "I showed up at his farm uninvited," Elena said. 5 weeks ago. I needed a husband to satisfy a clause in my father's will, and I'd researched ranchers in the area who fit certain criteria. Caleb was my first choice." Amanda's pen stopped moving. "You're saying this marriage was arranged?" "At first, yes. I was desperate. The 90-day deadline was approaching, and I was out of options, so I drove here, explained the situation, and asked Caleb to marry me." "And you agreed?" Amanda looked at Caleb. "Not immediately. I thought she was insane." He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. "But she made a compelling case. She was losing her company to someone who would use it to destroy farms like mine. She offered to help protect small farmers if I helped her keep control. It was a business arrangement." "Was," Daniel noted. Past tense. "Because it changed," Caleb said. "Somewhere between the courthouse and now, it stopped being just business." Dr. Mitchell spoke for the first time. "Can you elaborate on that? What specifically changed?" Elena took a breath. "Living together changed things. Working side by side, learning each other's routines, actually sharing a life instead of just sharing space. We went into this expecting it to be temporary, transactional, but you can't fake intimacy 24 hours a day. Eventually, the performance became reality." "Or you got better at performing," Amanda said. "It wasn't accusatory, just observational." "Maybe," Elena admitted. "Honestly, I can't always tell the difference anymore, but I know I care about him. I know losing him would hurt beyond just losing the company. Is that love? I don't know, but it's something real." Amanda made notes. "Mr. Ryder, do you agree with that assessment?" Caleb looked at Elena, at the woman who'd invaded his life and turned it upside down. "Yeah, I do. This started as a deal, and I'm not going to lie about that. But deals don't keep you up at night worried about the other person. Deals don't make you want to fight harder just to protect them. Whatever this is now, it's more than what it started as." The interview continued for another hour. They asked about finances, living arrangements, future plans. Caleb and Elena answered honestly, sometimes brutally so, about the unconventional beginning, the practical motivations, the slow shift into something neither of them had expected. "You understand how this looks," Amanda said finally. "A marriage arranged to satisfy a will, conducted with unusual speed between two people from completely different worlds. The timing alone raises questions." "We understand," Elena said. "But timing doesn't invalidate authenticity. People get married quickly for all kinds of reasons. Military deployment, pregnancy, immigration, circumstances force fast decisions all the time. Ours were corporate instead of military, but the principle is the same. We didn't have the luxury of a long courtship. And you're asking us to believe that in 5 weeks you've built a legitimate marriage? We're asking you to believe that we're trying," Caleb said. "We're not perfect. We're figuring this out as we go. But we're committed to making it work. And that commitment is real. Everything else, the timeline, the circumstances, the skeptics, that's just noise." Amanda closed her tablet. "We'll need to interview you separately now. Mrs. Voss, if you could wait in another room?" Elena stood, and as she passed Caleb, her hand brushed his shoulder. A small gesture, probably meaningless to the investigators. But Caleb felt the weight of it. Trust, solidarity, a reminder that they were in this together. The separate interviews were harder. Without Elena there to balance him, Caleb felt exposed. They asked about his finances, his motivations, whether he'd been coerced or paid. Dr. Mitchell watched him like she could see through skin to truth beneath, and maybe she could. "Do you love her?" she asked directly. Caleb met her eyes. "I'm learning to. It's not the lightning bolt love at first sight thing you see in movies. It's quieter than that, more gradual, but yeah, I think I'm getting there." That's an unusually honest answer. You asked for the truth, that's what it looks like. When Elena's turn came, Caleb paced the kitchen, unable to sit still. Through the walls, he could hear the murmur of voices, Elena's clear and steady, the investigators probing and persistent. He wanted to be in there, wanted to protect her from questions she shouldn't have to answer alone. But that wasn't how this worked. After 2 hours, Amanda emerged. "We're going to tour the property now. Both of you can accompany us." They walked the farm together, showing the investigators the fields, the equipment, the irrigation system Caleb had repaired after the sabotage. Elena talked about the work she'd been doing remotely, the restructuring plans, the farm protection initiative. Caleb showed them the broken valve, explained his suspicion that Victor was behind it. "You're alleging industrial sabotage?" Daniel asked. "I'm stating a fact. Someone cut that line deliberately. Who else would benefit from making me look incompetent or desperate?" They took pictures, made notes, asked more questions. By the time they finished the tour, it was past noon, and everyone was sweating in the August heat. Back at the house, Amanda gathered her team for a brief consultation. Caleb and Elena waited on the porch, not touching, but standing close. "How do you think it went?" Elena asked quietly. "Honestly, no idea." "Me neither." Amanda came back out alone. "We have enough for now. The team will compile our findings and present them to the board next week. You should have a decision within 10 days. "That's it?" Caleb asked. "For now. We may have follow-up questions, but the formal investigation portion is complete." She looked between them. "For what it's worth, you two have an unusual story. But unusual doesn't mean false. The board will make their determination based on evidence and credibility." After they left, Caleb and Elena stood in the yard watching dust settle where the vehicles had been. 10 days, Elena said. 10 days. "What do we do until then?" Caleb turned to her. "We live. Actually live, not just wait. Whatever happens, we gave them the truth. That's all we can do." That evening, they ate dinner on the porch as the sun set. Neither of them talked about the investigation or what might happen next. Instead, they talked about small things, a funny comment Daniel had made, the way Dr. Mitchell had studied them like a science experiment, Amanda's poker face that revealed nothing. "She didn't believe us," Elena said. "Maybe. Or maybe she did and just didn't show it." Always the optimist. "Someone has to be." Elena smiled, bumped his shoulder with hers. "When did you become the hopeful one? I thought I was supposed to be the polished executive with unshakable confidence." "You are. But you're also exhausted and terrified and trying to hold everything together. Someone's got to believe it'll work out." "And you believe that?" Caleb looked out at the fields turning gold in the fading light. "I believe we've got a shot. That's more than we had 5 weeks ago." That night they went to bed early, both too drained for more conversation. But as Caleb was drifting off, he felt Elena move closer, her back pressing against his chest, her hand finding his in the dark. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For being honest today, for not trying to sell them a fairy tale. We agreed on the truth." "I know, but it was still brave." She squeezed his hand. "Most people would have tried to make it sound better, more romantic. You just told them what it was." "What it is," Caleb corrected, "not past tense." She rolled over to face him, close enough that he could feel her breath. "What is it then? If you had to define it right now, what would you call this?" He thought about it, about convenience and necessity and the slow burn of something neither of them had planned for. "I'd call it a work in progress. Not finished, not perfect, but getting there." "I can live with that." They fell asleep tangled together, and if anyone had asked Caleb whether they were performing or being real, he wouldn't have had an answer. The line had blurred so completely that it didn't matter anymore. The next morning, everything exploded. Caleb woke to his phone ringing insistently. Unknown number again, but the hour, 6:47 a.m., suggested urgency. He answered, still half asleep. "Mr. Ryder, this is Amanda Pierce. I need you and Mrs. Voss to turn on the news, now." He sat up, Elena stirring beside him. "What's happening?" "Just turn it on. I'll call back in 10 minutes. Caleb found the remote, flipped to a news channel. It took him a moment to process what he was seeing. His farm. Aerial footage of his property, the reporter's voiceover talking about corporate intrigue and marriage fraud. Then the screen cut to a press conference. Victor Hale standing at a podium, looking grave and concerned. "Turn it up," Elena said, fully awake now. Victor's voice filled the bedroom. It pains me to bring this forward, but I have a responsibility to the shareholders of Voss Agricultural Holdings. Evidence has come to light that suggests my cousin's recent marriage may not be legitimate. I'm calling for an immediate and thorough investigation, not just by the board, but by federal authorities. If Elena Voss fraudulently circumvented her father's will through a sham marriage, that's not just a family matter. It's corporate fraud affecting billions in shareholder value. The screen showed documents, the courthouse filing, time-stamped photos of Elena's SUV on Caleb's property the day they met, financial transfers between their accounts, everything laid out to look as damning as possible. That son of a... Caleb started. Wait, Elena said. Look, the reporter was back on screen. But in a surprising development, sources close to the investigation committee say they've found no evidence of fraud. In fact, the committee's preliminary report, leaked to our network this morning, suggests the marriage appears legitimate despite its unconventional beginning. Victor's face appeared again, caught off guard by a reporter's question. Mr. Hale, how do you respond to the investigation committee finding no wrongdoing? I haven't seen that report, Victor said, recovering quickly. But I maintain that the timing and circumstances warrant further scrutiny, the reporter pressed. But if the committee, appointed by the board you sit on, finds the marriage legitimate, doesn't that undermine your challenge? Victor's expression hardened. We'll see what the board decides. Elena's phone rang. She answered on speaker. Did you see it? Amanda's voice. We're watching now, Elena said. Victor jumped the gun. He leaked his evidence to the media before waiting for our report, probably hoping public pressure would sway the board. But it backfired. Our preliminary findings, which weren't supposed to be public yet, show no evidence of fraud. The marriage appears legitimate, if unconventional. Caleb felt his heart hammering. Appears legitimate? Your story is consistent. Your living situation is genuine, and frankly, the way you two interact suggests a real relationship, not a performance. We're recommending the board dismiss Victor's challenge. Recommend, Elena noted. Not guarantee. The board still has to vote, but with our report supporting you and Victor looking like he's on a witch hunt, I'd say your chances are good. Amanda paused. There's something else. The sabotage you reported, the cut irrigation line. We forwarded that to local authorities. They're opening an investigation. After she hung up, Caleb and Elena sat in bed, still processing. We might actually pull this off, Elena said slowly. Don't celebrate yet. The board still has to vote. But Amanda said our chances are good. Not guaranteed. Caleb got out of bed, started pacing. Victor's not done. He wouldn't have gone to the media if he had anything left to lose. This is a desperate move, which makes him dangerous. Elena watched him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we need to be ready for whatever he does next. Because men like Victor don't accept defeat gracefully. He was right. The attack came that night. Caleb was out doing a final check of the equipment before bed when he smelled it. Smoke. Faint but unmistakable, coming from the direction of the storage barn. He ran. The barn was already engulfed when he reached it, flames tearing through old wood like it was paper. Inside was everything he needed for next season. Seed, fertilizer, spare parts. Tools his grandfather had used, decades of accumulated equipment and supplies, burning. Elena! He shouted, but she was already there, phone to her ear, calling 911. The fire department was 20 minutes away. By the time they arrived, the barn was gone, just a smoking shell still glowing in places, heat radiating out in waves that made it impossible to get close. The fire chief pulled Caleb aside. Anyone inside? No, just equipment. You're lucky. Another hour and it would have spread to the house. He studied the remains. We'll investigate, but this doesn't look accidental. You got any enemies? Caleb laughed, harsh and bitter. Yeah, I got enemies. Elena stood in the yard, covered in ash from trying to help, and when she looked at Caleb, her eyes were bright with tears and rage. Victor did this, she said. Can you prove it? I'll find a way. Her voice shook. I'll take everything from him. His position, his reputation, his freedom. I'll make sure he pays for this. Elena, no. She turned on him. You could have died. If you'd been in there, if the fire had spread faster, this isn't corporate warfare anymore, Caleb. This is attempted murder. She wasn't wrong. The fire had been set deliberately. The fire chief confirmed it an hour later. Accelerant used, multiple ignition points, professional arson. They spent the rest of the night giving statements to fire investigators and police. By the time the officials left, it was nearly dawn. Caleb and Elena sat on the porch steps, watching the sun come up over the charred remains of the barn. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. "Not your fault." "Of course it is. Victor's targeting you to get to me. Everything you've lost, the irrigation damage, now this, it's because I dragged you into my war." Caleb took her hand. "I walked into this war willingly. You gave me a choice, remember? I could have said no." "Would you? If you could go back knowing what it would cost, would you still say yes?" He thought about it, about the barn burning, the media scrutiny, the investigation and stress and fear. Then he thought about the woman sitting beside him, hand in his, fighting battles on too many fronts but still standing. "Yeah," he said, "I would." "Why?" "Because some things are worth fighting for. The farm, your company, what we're building here, it matters. And I'm not the kind of person who walks away when things matter." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. "We're going to lose everything, aren't we?" "Maybe. Or maybe we're going to win in ways we didn't expect." He kissed the top of her head, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. "Either way, we're doing it together. That's got to count for something." They sat there as the sun climbed higher, two people who'd started as strangers and become something neither of them had a name for yet. The barn was gone. The investigation was pending. Victor was circling like a predator. But they were still standing, and for now, that was enough. The arson investigation moved fast once the evidence started coming together. By Monday afternoon, fire investigators had traced the accelerant to a specific brand sold at 3 locations within 50 miles. Security footage from one showed a man matching the description of Victor's messenger purchasing 2 gallons 48 hours before the fire. Elena's phone rang constantly. Lawyers, board members, media requests. She fielded them all from the kitchen table while Caleb dealt with insurance adjusters and started the grim work of cataloging what had been lost. "They want me in Chicago for an emergency board meeting," Elena said, hanging up from yet another call. "Tomorrow morning, Victor's calling for a vote to remove me based on the arson charges, claiming I orchestrated it myself for sympathy." Caleb looked up from the clipboard where he'd been itemizing destroyed equipment. "That's insane." "It's Victor. Logic doesn't matter when you're desperate." She rubbed her temples. "But here's the thing. The police have evidence tying his associate to the accelerant purchase. If I can get that in front of the board before they vote, it changes everything." "Can you?" "I'm going to try." She stood up, started pacing. "But I need the police to move faster. Right now all they have is circumstantial. A man who works for Victor buying accelerant. That's not enough for charges, and without charges the board might dismiss it as speculation." "What do you need?" Elena stopped pacing, looked at him. "I need Victor to make a mistake. Something concrete that ties him directly to the arson, not just his associate. And I need it before tomorrow's vote." Caleb set down the clipboard. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Victor's arrogant. He's convinced he's untouchable, that he's been careful enough to avoid direct culpability. But arrogant people get sloppy when they think they're winning." She pulled out her phone, started typing. "I'm going to give him a reason to think he's won. Make him believe I'm backing down, that the fire broke me. And when he gets comfortable, when he thinks it's safe to gloat, maybe he'll say something he shouldn't. You want to bait him. I want to give him enough rope to hang himself." Elena sent the message, then showed Caleb the screen. It was to Victor. "We need to talk. Privately. Before the board meeting. I'm willing to discuss terms." "He'll know it's a trap," Caleb said. "Maybe, but his ego won't let him resist. He'll want to see me surrender in person. Hear me admit defeat. That need to win, it'll override his caution." The response came within minutes. "My office, tonight, 8 p.m. Come alone." Elena smiled, sharp and dangerous. "Got him." "You're not actually going alone." "Of course not. I'll have you." "Elena," he said, "come alone." He didn't say anything about my husband waiting in the car. She was already moving, gathering her things. "We record the whole conversation. If he admits to anything, if he even implies involvement in the sabotage or arson, we have him." It was risky, probably illegal. Definitely the kind of thing that could backfire spectacularly. But Caleb saw the determination in Elena's eyes and knew arguing would be pointless. "Okay," he said, "but we do this smart. You wear a wire, I stay close, and the second things feel wrong, you leave." Agreed. They drove to Chicago that afternoon, Elena on the phone with lawyers the entire way, building their legal strategy around whatever they could get from Victor. One attorney cautioned her about recording laws, single-party consent versus two-party, admissibility in court. Elena listened, thanked him, and kept planning anyway. "We might not be able to use it legally," she told Caleb, "but if he admits something damning, even just to me, I can threaten to go public. Force his hand before the board vote." "That's blackmail. That's leverage. There's a difference." They checked into a hotel near Victor's downtown office. Elena paced the room while Caleb set up the recording equipment, a small device one of her lawyers had couriered over, professional grade, virtually undetectable when worn properly. "You're sure about this?" Caleb asked, helping her position the wire. "I'm sure I don't have a choice. If the board votes to remove me tomorrow and we don't have evidence against Victor, it's over. He wins the company, and everything we've fought for disappears." She met his eyes in the mirror. "I can't let that happen. Even if it means breaking the law? Even then." She turned to face him directly. "I know that makes me sound ruthless. Maybe I am. But Victor burned down your barn, Caleb. He could have killed you. I'm not letting him walk away from that." The fierceness in her voice surprised him. This wasn't about the company anymore, or not just about it. This was personal. Someone had threatened her husband, and she wasn't going to stand for it. Her husband. When had Caleb started thinking of himself that way? "Be careful," he said. "Victor's dangerous when he's cornered." "So am I." Victor's office was in a high-rise overlooking the Chicago River, all glass and steel and the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Elena checked in with building security while Caleb waited in the lobby, trying to look like just another visitor. "I'll be fine," Elena said quietly before heading to the elevator. "Give me 30 minutes. If I'm not down by then, come up." Caleb watched the elevator doors close, then found a chair with a view of the building entrance. His phone was in his hand, connected to the wire's receiver, letting him hear everything. Static for a moment, then footsteps. An elevator chime. More footsteps. Heels on marble. "Elena!" Victor's voice came through clear. "Right on time. Come in." The sound of a door closing. Then Victor again. "I have to admit, I was surprised to get your message. You didn't strike me as someone who surrenders easily." "I'm practical." Elena's voice was steady. "The fire destroyed equipment Caleb needs to keep the farm running. The insurance payout will take months. Without the company's resources to support him, he'll lose everything before harvest. I can't let that happen." "How noble. Sacrificing your career for love." "I'm sacrificing my position to protect someone who doesn't deserve to be caught in our family war. There's a difference." A pause, then Victor, sounding pleased. "So you're willing to step down? Accept the buyout I offered?" "I want to hear your terms first, and I want your word that the attacks on Caleb stop. No more sabotage, no more fires. He's out of this." "Of course. I have no quarrel with your husband. He was just, what's the phrase, collateral damage." In the lobby, Caleb's hands clenched around the phone. Collateral damage. Like burning down someone's livelihood was just an unfortunate side effect. "Collateral damage," Elena repeated, and Caleb could hear the ice in her voice. "Is that what you call arson?" "I call it sending a message." Victor's tone was casual, conversational. "You needed to understand the stakes, that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to claim what should have been mine from the beginning. The company was never yours." "It should have been. My uncle built it, yes, but I worked alongside him for 20 years. I understood his vision better than you ever could. And then he dies and leaves it all to you, his daughter, who spent half her life running from the business, who only came back when it was convenient." The bitterness in Victor's voice was sharp. "You think you deserve it because of blood? Because you carry his name? I think I deserve it because I've earned it. Because I've restructured failing divisions, improved profit margins, and actually care about the people affected by our decisions. What have you earned except a reputation for ruthlessness? Ruthlessness gets results. Your father knew that, even if he forgot it at the end. That ridiculous marriage clause forcing you to find a husband like some Victorian marriage plot, it was his way of testing you.
seeing if you were desperate enough to do what it takes to hold on to power. Victor laughed. And you were. You found some nobody rancher and convinced him to play along. That takes a certain kind of ruthlessness, too. Caleb isn't nobody. Please. He's a convenient prop. Disposable. The fire proved that. You're here ready to sacrifice your position to protect him. That's not love, Elena. That's guilt. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? You married him out of necessity. Everything since has been performance, trying to convince yourself and everyone else that it's real. But it's not. It's just another business arrangement, and you're finally smart enough to recognize that some arrangements aren't worth maintaining. Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. You really believe that? That Caleb means nothing to me? I believe you're practical enough to cut your losses when necessary. The farm, the husband, the fairy tale marriage. You can walk away from all of it. Take the buyout, start over somewhere else. Leave the company to someone who actually knows how to run it. Someone like you. Exactly like me. And the arson? The sabotage? That all just goes away if I step down? Consider it water under the bridge. No charges, no investigations. We tell the board you're resigning for personal reasons and everyone moves on. Papers rustling. I have the agreement here. Sign it and this is over. More silence. Caleb sat forward in his chair, every muscle tense. Before I sign anything, Elena said carefully, I need to know it was just the barn. That you didn't plan anything else. What do you mean?
I mean, I need to know Caleb is safe, that there won't be another fire, another accident, that your message has been sent and received. Victor made a dismissive sound. The barn was sufficient. Your husband should consider himself lucky. The associate I hired wanted to target the house. I told him that was excessive. I'm not trying to kill anyone, Elena. Just make a point. In the lobby, Caleb's breath caught. There it was. Admission of hiring someone, of targeting the barn specifically. That's almost reassuring, Elena said dryly. I'm not a monster, just a businessman willing to do what's necessary. Your father understood that. He built this company through aggressive expansion, strategic pressure, making hard choices. You want to turn it into some charity operation helping struggling farmers. That's not a business model. That's sentiment. It's sustainability. If we keep crushing small operations, eventually there won't be anyone left to buy from. The agricultural industry needs diversity, not consolidation. It needs efficiency, but we're not here to debate philosophy. More paper sounds. The agreement. Sign it, and we're done. Let me read it first.
Footsteps. Then Elena's voice, quieter, reading terms under her breath. Caleb checked his watch. 22 minutes. She needed to get out of there soon before Victor started questioning why she was stalling. This is generous, Elena said finally. Almost suspiciously so. I can be magnanimous in victory. Besides, the faster you sign, the faster I can begin implementing real changes. The board meeting is tomorrow. I'd like to present this as a done deal. I'm sure you would. Another pause. Victor, can I ask you something? If you must. Did you ever respect my father, actually respect what he built? Or did you just see it as something you deserved?
I respected his results, his methods, the empire he created from nothing. Victor's voice softened slightly. I even respected his decision to leave it to you initially. I thought maybe he saw something I didn't, that you'd prove yourself worthy. But this past year, the hesitation, the restructuring, the bleeding heart policies, you've proven you're not your father's daughter. You're too soft for this business. And you're too blinded by ambition to see the difference between strength and cruelty. The temperature in the conversation dropped. Excuse me? I said you're cruel, Victor, not strong. Strong leaders don't burn down barns, they don't sabotage irrigation systems or send threatening messages through intermediaries. They compete on merit. I competed on merit for 20 years and got nowhere. Sometimes you have to take what's yours. It was never yours to take. Sign the agreement, Elena. No. The word hung in the air. Caleb stood up, already moving toward the elevator. I'm sorry? Victor's voice had gone dangerously quiet. I said no. I'm not signing your agreement, I'm not stepping down, and I'm definitely not letting you take my father's company and pervert it into something he'd despise. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was coming here thinking you'd be stupid enough to confess. But you did, Victor. Every word of this conversation has been recorded. The barn, the associate you hired, your admission of orchestrating sabotage, all of it. Silence. Then Victor, sharp. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your security footage. I came in wearing a wire. It's all documented. Sounds of movement. Victor's voice tight with rage. You little... Don't. Elena's voice was steel. I'm walking out of here. You're going to let me leave. And tomorrow at the board meeting, you're going to withdraw your challenge and resign from the board entirely. Because if you don't, this recording goes to the police, to the media, and to every board member. Your career will be over. That recording is illegal, inadmissible in court. Maybe, but it's perfectly admissible in the court of public opinion. How do you think shareholders will react when they hear you admit to arson? When they learn you targeted my husband to get to me? She moved toward the door. You wanted ruthless, Victor? Here it is. Back down or I'll destroy you. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. The door opened. Footsteps. Faster now. The elevator chimed. Caleb was waiting when the elevator doors opened on the ground floor. Elena stepped out, face pale but composed, and walked straight into his arms. I got it, she said against his shoulder. All of it. They didn't speak again until they were back at the hotel, door locked, recording device sitting on the desk like evidence at a trial. He confessed to everything, Elena said, playing back sections of the conversation. Hiring the associate, targeting the barn, the sabotage. It's all here. Can we use it? Caleb asked. Legally? Maybe not. But Victor doesn't know that for certain. The threat alone might be enough to make him back down. She stopped the playback. I'm sending this to my lawyers tonight. By morning, they'll have a strategy. Caleb pulled her close, feeling the adrenaline still vibrating through her. That was dangerous. If he'd gotten violent... But he didn't. He's too controlled for that. Too careful about maintaining his image. She looked up at Caleb. Besides, I knew you were there. I wasn't really alone. Never are, he said quietly. Not anymore. That night they lay in bed, neither sleeping despite the exhaustion. Too much adrenaline, too many what-ifs playing through their minds. What if he doesn't back down? Elena asked the darkness. What if he calls my bluff and forces this to court? Then we fight, same as we've been doing. We could lose everything. We could. Caleb rolled onto his side, found her hand. But we could also win. And either way, we're doing it together. You keep saying that like it doesn't matter, but it does. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're not facing it alone. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When did you stop thinking of this as temporary? I don't know. Somewhere between the courthouse and tonight, I stopped planning an exit and started thinking about staying. Even though this is insane, even though we barely know each other and got married for all the wrong reasons, especially because of that. He squeezed her hand. We're building something real out of something fake. That's harder than starting with love and trying to make it last. We're working backward and somehow making it work. Are we, though? Making it work? Caleb thought about the past 6 weeks. The performances that became habit, the habits that became connection, the connection that was becoming something neither of them had a name for yet. Yeah, he said. I think we are. She moved closer, tucking herself against him, and he wrapped his arms around her like he'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. But less scared with you here? Same. They fell asleep like that, holding each other against the uncertainty of tomorrow. The board meeting started at 9. Elena arrived early, flanked by her attorneys, carrying the recording device in her briefcase like a weapon she hoped she wouldn't have to use. Caleb waited in the lobby again, pacing this time. He'd offered to sit in as her husband, but Elena had refused. This was her battle, she'd said. He'd fought his part. Now it was her turn. His phone buzzed with updates from Elena's assistant, keeping him informed. Board members arriving. Victor arriving. Meeting starting. Then nothing for an hour. The silence was torture. Finally, at 10:47, his phone rang. Elena. It's over, she said, and her voice was shaking. Victor withdrew his challenge, resigned from the board. He's out. Caleb's knees went weak. What happened? I told them about the recording, offered to play it if necessary. Victor's lawyers must have advised him to cut his losses because he stood up and said he was resigning effective immediately. The board voted to dismiss all challenges to my position. I keep control. Elena, I know, I can't believe it either. She laughed, slightly hysterical. We won, Caleb. We actually won. You won. You're the one who got the confession, who faced him down. We won, she corrected. This doesn't happen without you, without the marriage, without you standing by me through all of this. We did this together. After she hung up, Caleb stood in the lobby for a long moment, processing. It was over. The corporate warfare, the investigation, Victor's threats, over. They'd survived. The realization hit him harder than he expected. For 6 weeks, they'd been running on crisis and necessity, building their relationship in the spaces between battles. Now that the war was done, they'd have to figure out what they actually were to each other. The thought was terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. Elena emerged from the building 3 hours later, surrounded by congratulating board members and lawyers. She accepted their praise with grace, but Caleb could see the exhaustion underneath. When she finally broke free and made it to where he was waiting, she looked ready to collapse. Take me home, she said. Chicago or Nebraska? She didn't hesitate. Nebraska. Home. They drove back that afternoon, Elena sleeping most of the way, head against the window. When they finally pulled up to the farm, the house still standing, the barn still a charred ruin, she woke and looked at it like seeing it for the first time. This is home, she said, more to herself than to him. When did that happen? Probably around the time you started doing dishes, Caleb said, making her smile. Inside, the house felt different. Quieter, maybe. Without the constant pressure of investigation and threat, the space seemed larger, emptier. They moved through it carefully, both aware that something fundamental had shifted. What now? Elena asked, standing in the kitchen where this had all started. Now we rebuild. The barn, the operation, all of it. Insurance money should come through soon. I meant us. What happens with us now that we don't have to pretend anymore? Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd invaded his life with impossible demands and somehow become the center of it. I don't know. What do you want to happen? I want to stop being scared that this is temporary. I want to stop wondering when you're going to realize you don't actually need to be married to me anymore. She wrapped her arms around herself. I want this to be real, not just real enough to fool investigators. Elena. He crossed the kitchen, took her hands. It's been real for a while now. You know that, right? Do I? We got married for practical reasons. Everything since has been about survival. How do we know what's real and what's just Stockholm Syndrome or proximity or... He kissed her, cut off the spiral of doubt with the simplest answer he had. When he pulled back, she was staring at him with wide eyes. That real enough? He asked. That's not fair. You can't just... He kissed her again, longer this time, and she stopped protesting and kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she was smiling. Okay, she said, that's real. Damn right it is. Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how this happened. I don't know when we went from strangers to this, but I know I don't want to go back. I know losing you would hurt worse than losing the farm, and I know that 6 weeks isn't enough time to fall in love according to normal people, but we're not normal people. No, we're really not. So what do you want to do about it? Elena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I want to try. Actually try, not just for show. I want to see where this goes without the pressure, without Victor, without investigators watching our every move. Just us, figuring out if we can make this work. Sounds good to me. Even though I'm terrible at domesticity and work too much and have a dozen neuroses you haven't even discovered yet, even though I'm stubborn and set in my ways and will probably never fully understand your corporate world. Especially because of that. She kissed him this time, soft and sure. We're a disaster, Caleb Ryder. Best kind of disaster there is. They made dinner together that night, working around each other in the small kitchen with an ease that had become natural. Elena burned the rice, Caleb oversalted the vegetables. They ate it anyway, laughing at how terrible they were at domestic partnership. Later, lying in bed, their bed, no more pretending, Elena traced patterns on Caleb's chest. The board wants me to implement the farm protection program immediately, she said. Start reaching out to struggling operations, offering support instead of buyouts. That's what you wanted. It is, But it means I'll be traveling more, meeting with farmers, touring properties. I might be gone a few days at a time. We'll manage. I've been running this place solo for years. I know, but she hesitated. I don't want you to think I'm abandoning this. The farm, us. I want to make both work. Caleb turned to face her. Then we make it work. You do what you need to do with the company. I keep the farm running, and when you're here, we're here together. That's enough. Is it really? Elena, you restructured your entire life for this. Moved to Nebraska, lived through investigation and arson, faced down Victor. I think I can handle you traveling for work sometimes. He tucked hair behind her ear. Besides, it'll make coming home more exciting. She smiled. You're too understanding. It's annoying. I contain multitudes. Apparently, they were quiet for a while, just holding each other. Then Elena said, Caleb? Yeah? I think I'm falling in love with you. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I am. His chest tightened. Yeah, me too. Really? Really? Probably have been for a while. Just took me a bit to catch up. She kissed him, slow and deep, and there was nothing performative about it. This was real. Messy and complicated and completely real. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Elena launched the Farm Protection Initiative, traveling to meet with struggling operations across the Midwest. Caleb rebuilt the barn with insurance money, upgrading the design, making it better than before. When Elena was home, they worked side by side, her on calls with board members, him on equipment repairs. When she was gone, they talked every night, trading stories about difficult farmers and stubborn machinery. Tom Henderson stopped by one afternoon while Elena was in Iowa. Heard the news about Victor, he said, accepting a beer on the porch. That true? He actually admitted to the arson? More or less. Damn, Tom shook his head. Your wife's tougher than she looks. Yeah, she is. You doing okay? With all of it? Caleb looked out at the fields, green and healthy, despite everything they'd been through. Better than okay. For the first time in years, I'm not worried about losing this place. Elena's program is helping farms like mine get back on their feet. We're going to make it. And the marriage? That working out? It is, actually. Tom studied him. You love her. It wasn't a question, but Caleb answered anyway. Yeah, I do. Good. She looks at you the same way. Noticed it last time she was here, the way she watched you when you weren't looking. That's not fake. No, it's not. After Tom left, Caleb called Elena. Miss me? She answered. Maybe a little. Liar, I bet you're enjoying the peace and quiet. It's too quiet. Come home soon. 2 more days. I've got meetings in Des Moines tomorrow. Then I'm all yours. Her voice softened. How's the new barn coming? Good. Roof goes on this week. Want to help me paint it when you get back? Paint a barn? That's very wholesome and domestic of us. We're married farmers now. It's literally in the job description. She laughed. Okay, I'll help paint the barn, but I'm picking the color. Deal. When Elena came home Friday evening, exhausted from travel, Caleb met her in the driveway. She got out of the rental car and walked straight into his arms. Missed you, she said against his shoulder. Missed you too. How was Iowa? Productive. Met with 8 farmers, got 6 of them enrolled in the program. 2 more are thinking about it. She pulled back to look at him. This is working, Caleb. We're actually helping people keep their farms. That's because you're good at what you do. We're good. This was your idea, too. They went inside and Elena immediately changed into work clothes. His old jeans and a flannel shirt she'd claimed weeks ago. They made dinner together, Elena talking about the farmers she'd met, the challenges they faced, the solutions she'd offered. Caleb told her about the barn progress, about Tom's visit, about small victories in a week without her. It felt married. Actually married, not performed or strategic. Just 2 people sharing their lives. That night in bed, Elena said, I've been thinking about something dangerous. She swatted his chest. Serious thinking. About us, about the future. Okay. When we got married, we said 6 months. See where we stood, then decide whether to stay together or divorce quietly. She propped herself up on her elbow. That was 6 weeks ago. We have about 4.5 months left on that agreement. Caleb's stomach tightened. Yeah? I don't want to wait 4.5 months to decide. I already know. Know what? That I want to stay. That I want this, us, to be permanent. Not because of the company or the farm or any practical reason, just because I love you and I want to build a life with you. She met his eyes. Is that crazy? Probably, but so is agreeing to marry you in the first place. He pulled her close. I want to stay too. Skip the waiting period. Just commit to making this work. Really?
Really? You're stuck with me, Elena Voss Ryder. That's a terrible hyphenated name. You picked it. I picked you. The name was just collateral damage. They laughed and kissed and held each other as the certainty of their decision settled around them. What had started as desperation and necessity had become something neither of them wanted to walk away from.
A week later, they painted the barn together. Elena chose a deep red that Caleb pretended to hate but actually loved. They worked in comfortable silence, brushes moving in rhythm, occasionally stealing kisses when they thought the other wasn't looking. You're terrible at this, Caleb said, pointing to a section where she'd dripped paint. You're terrible at giving constructive criticism. That was constructive. I constructed a sentence that accurately described your painting skills. Elena flicked paint at him. He retaliated. Within minutes, they were covered in red paint, laughing like kids, the barn half finished and beautiful. That night, sitting on the porch as the sun set over fields that were theirs, truly theirs now, saved and secure, Elena leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder. We did it, she said quietly. Did what? Made something real out of something fake. Built a marriage out of a business deal. Fell in love when we weren't supposed to. Caleb kissed the top of her head. Yeah, we did. Think we can keep doing it? Keep making this work? I know we can. She smiled. Always the optimist. Someone has to be. They sat there as stars emerged, two people who'd started as strangers bound by necessity and become partners bound by choice. The barn stood behind them, rebuilt and stronger. The farm stretched ahead, secured and thriving, and between them, something neither had expected but both had found. It wasn't the fairy tale they'd sold to investigators. It was better, messier and harder won, built on honesty instead of performance, on choice instead of convenience. It was real, and it was theirs. The months that followed weren't perfect. Real life never was. Elena's travel schedule picked up as the farm protection program expanded. Some weeks she was gone 4 days out of 7, flying between properties in Kansas, Iowa, the Dakotas. Caleb stayed home, working the land, learning to miss someone in a way he never had before. They fought about it once, late on a Tuesday when she'd canceled a trip home because of an emergency board meeting. You said 2 days, Caleb said on the phone, trying to keep the disappointment out of his voice and failing. I know what I said, but this meeting is critical. We're voting on expansion into 3 new states. It's always critical, always one more meeting, one more crisis. That's my job, Caleb. You knew that when what? When I married you? Yeah, I did. Doesn't make it easier. Silence on the line. Then Elena, quieter. You're right. I'm sorry. I should have managed the schedule better. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I miss you. Is that allowed? It's allowed. I miss you too. He heard her exhale. I'm trying to balance this, the company, the farm, us. Some days I feel like I'm failing at all 3. You're not failing. Feels like it sometimes. They worked it out, the way married people did. Compromise and conversation, Elena blocking out weekends as sacred home time, Caleb joining her on some trips when the farm allowed it. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. 3 months after Victor's resignation, the legal fallout finally caught up with him. The police investigation into the arson found enough evidence to file charges: conspiracy to commit arson, criminal sabotage, destruction of property. Elena received the call from the prosecutor's office on a Wednesday morning. They're offering him a plea deal, she told Caleb. Guilty plea, restitution to you for the barn, and 2 years probation, no jail time. Caleb was fixing fence posts when she called. He stopped working, wiped sweat from his face. What do you think? I think it's not enough, but the prosecutor says the case is circumstantial. The recording helps, but it's not admissible. Without it, they might not win at trial. So Victor walks. Essentially, Elena sounded tired. He's also being sued by the board for breach of fiduciary duty. That'll cost him millions, and his reputation is destroyed. No company will touch him after this. But yeah, criminally, he walks. How do you feel about that? She was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I'm tired of fighting him. If this ends it, if he pays restitution and goes away, I'll take it. Revenge isn't worth the energy. Caleb understood that. Forgiveness wasn't about Victor deserving it. It was about Elena and Caleb deserving peace. Then let it end, he said. Take the deal. The restitution check arrived 6 weeks later. Caleb used it to finish the barn upgrades, buy new equipment, and set aside a reserve fund for emergencies. The money couldn't erase what had happened, but it helped rebuild what had been lost. Victor himself disappeared from public life. Rumor had it he'd moved to Arizona, taken a low-level consulting job, faded into obscurity. Elena never mentioned him, and Caleb didn't ask. Some chapters closed quietly, and that was fine. As fall approached, bringing harvest season, Elena made a decision. I want to help, she announced one morning over coffee. Caleb looked up from the weather report he'd been studying. Help with what? Harvest. I want to actually work it, not just watch from the sidelines. Elena, harvest is brutal. 18-hour days, physical labor, everything breaking at the worst possible time. It's not, I know what it is, and I want to do it anyway. This is our farm, Caleb, not just yours. If I'm going to call it home, I should understand what it takes to run it. He studied her face, looking for hesitation and finding none. Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. Harvest started the second week of September. Elena cleared her schedule as much as possible, delegating urgent matters to her executive team and fielding calls between combine runs. The first day, she lasted 6 hours before exhaustion forced her to stop. Everything hurts, she said, collapsing on the porch that evening. Muscles I didn't know I had are staging a revolt. Caleb handed her a beer. Want to quit? Absolutely not. She didn't. Every morning she got up before dawn, pulled on work clothes, and climbed into the combine or hauled grain or did whatever needed doing. She learned to read the wheat, to judge when it was ready, to feel the rhythm of the work. By the end of the first week, she'd developed calluses and a deeper understanding of why Caleb fought so hard to keep this place. I get it now, she said one evening, watching the sun set over freshly harvested fields. Why you couldn't walk away. This isn't just a farm. It's a promise you made to your grandfather, to your father, to yourself. Yeah. I'm glad you didn't break it, even when it would have been easier. Caleb pulled her close, both of them covered in dust and sweat, too tired for anything except being together. I'm glad too. They brought in the harvest 3 days ahead of schedule. The yield was strong, better than the past 5 years combined. Standing in the barn, looking at stored grain that represented months of work and worry, Caleb felt something release in his chest that he hadn't known he'd been holding. We did it, he said. Elena leaned against him, exhausted and happy. We make a good team. Yeah, we do. The success of the harvest brought financial breathing room Caleb hadn't had in years. He paid down the bank loans, reinvested in the property, started planning improvements for next season. For the first time since his father died, the farm felt sustainable instead of precarious. Elena's company thrived too. The farm protection program saved 43 operations in its first year, turning what could have been foreclosures into partnerships. Board members who'd initially questioned her leadership now deferred to her judgment. Industry publications profiled her as a visionary, someone redefining what agricultural corporations could be. They're calling me a reformer, she told Caleb, showing him a magazine article. Like I invented the concept of not destroying small businesses. You kind of did, in this industry anyway. That's depressing, but true. As winter settled in, bringing quiet and cold, they fell into domestic routines that felt earned rather than performed. Elena worked from the kitchen table, video meetings with executives who'd grown accustomed to seeing Nebraska farmland in the background. Caleb maintained equipment, planned for spring planting, occasionally joined her calls to offer perspective on farmer needs. One evening in January, nearly a year after Elena had first arrived, Tom Henderson invited them to dinner. The invitation surprised Caleb. Tom wasn't much for socializing, but they accepted. Tom's wife Martha greeted them at the door with warmth that suggested she'd been wanting to meet Elena properly for months. Over pot roast and stories, the evening unfolded into something unexpectedly moving. You saved our farm, Martha said during dessert. She was looking at Elena, eyes bright. That protection program of yours, Tom was too proud to tell you, but we were 3 months from foreclosure when your people reached out. Elena set down her fork. I didn't know you'd enrolled. We're not the only ones around here, Tom added. 6 farms within 20 miles are part of the program now. You're keeping this community alive, Mrs. Ryder. The name still caught Caleb off guard sometimes. Mrs. Ryder, his wife, the woman who'd shown up desperate and become essential. I'm just trying to do what should have been done years ago, Elena said. Well, it matters. More than you probably know. Martha reached across the table, squeezed Elena's hand. You're one of us now, not just Caleb's wife. One of us. On the drive home, Elena was quiet. Caleb let the silence sit until they pulled into their driveway. You okay? He asked. I've never belonged anywhere before. Not really. My father's world was all competition and posturing. I had colleagues, but not community. She looked at the dark field stretching away. Here, I have both. It's strange. Good, but strange. Welcome home, Caleb said simply. She smiled. Yeah, home. As spring approached, bringing planting season and new challenges, they faced a decision that had been hovering unspoken for months. Elena brought it up on a Sunday morning, both of them still in bed, lazy with sleep and comfort. I've been thinking about the future, she said. Dangerous. I'm serious. About what we want. Long term, I mean. Caleb turned to face her. Okay. What do you want? I want this to be our primary residence. I want to sell the Chicago condo, make the farm our real home, not just where I stay between trips. You hate winter here. I hate winter everywhere, but I hate it less when I'm with you. She traced patterns on his chest. I also want to start transitioning some of my responsibilities to other executives. Build a team I can trust so I'm not traveling constantly. Why? Because I want to actually live here, not just sleep here. I want to plant a garden, learn to can vegetables, do all the domestic things I never had time for before. She hesitated. And maybe, eventually, I want kids. If you want that, Caleb's breath caught. They'd never discussed children. The topic felt too serious, too permanent for a marriage that had started as temporary. Kids, he repeated. Not right now, but someday, a couple years from now maybe, when we're more settled, more sure. She watched his face. Is that something you'd want? He thought about it, about children running through these fields, learning to drive tractors, carrying on the family legacy, about teaching them what his father had taught him, watching Elena become a mother, building something that lasted beyond either of them. Yeah, he said quietly. I'd want that. Her smile was radiant. Really? Really. Not tomorrow, but someday. When we're ready. She kissed him, and it tasted like promise and hope and all the futures they were building together. The conversation planted seeds that grew over the following months. Elena did sell the Chicago condo, using the money to renovate the farmhouse. They updated the kitchen, added a second bathroom, turned the spare room into a proper office for her. She hired an executive vice president to handle day-to-day operations, freeing her to focus on strategic decisions and spend more time in Nebraska. By summer, a new rhythm had established itself. Elena traveled twice a month instead of twice a week. The rest of the time, she worked from the farm, taking calls from the porch, hosting video meetings with the wheat fields as her backdrop. She learned to garden from Martha Henderson, planted tomatoes and beans and herbs that mostly survived her inexperienced care. I'm terrible at this, she said, surveying her modest garden. Caleb, standing beside her with dirt under his nails from helping, disagreed. You're learning. That's different. The tomatoes are dying. Some of them. The others are thriving. You can't save everything. The words hung between them, heavier than intended. Elena looked at him, understanding the layers beneath the simple observation. No, she said softly. But you can save what matters, and you can build something good from what survives. That summer also brought the 1-year anniversary of their marriage. Caleb woke that morning with a plan. Get dressed, he told Elena. Something nice. Why? It's a surprise. She was suspicious, but complied. An hour later, they were standing at the courthouse in Alliance, the same courthouse where they'd filed for their marriage license a year ago. What are we doing here? Elena asked. Caleb took her hand. 1 year ago, we got married in this building. It was fast and practical and about survival. We said vows we meant at the time but didn't fully understand. Caleb, let me finish. That marriage saved both of us. Your company, my farm, everything we have now, it started here. But it wasn't about love. It was about necessity. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I want to give you a choice you didn't have then. To marry me again, for real this time. Not because you have to, because you want to. Elena stared at the box. You're proposing? I'm asking if you want to renew our vows. Make them mean what we mean now, instead of what we meant then. He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, nothing like the hasty band she'd bought that first day. Marry me, Elena. Actually marry me. Choose me the way I'm choosing you. Her eyes were bright with tears. We're already married. Legally, yeah. But I want us to be married in every way. Heart, soul, choice. Not because a will forced you or desperation drove you. Because you love me, and I love you, and we're building something worth choosing every day. She took the ring from the box, studying it. This is insane. We're already legally bound. So this doesn't change anything legally, it just makes it mean more. Elena looked up at him, tears on her cheeks, smiling despite them. You're ridiculously sentimental for a stoic farmer. You bring it out in me. I love you, she said. I choose you. Every day for the rest of our lives, I choose you. Is that a yes? That's a hell yes. They went inside and found Judge Morrison, the same judge who'd married them the first time. She recognized them immediately. Back again? She asked, amused. Renewing our vows, Caleb explained. Making it official. The judge smiled. I like that. Let's do this properly then. This time, the ceremony was different. No lawyers as witnesses, just Tom and Martha Henderson, who they'd called on the way over. No business arrangement, just two people standing before each other with full knowledge of what they were promising. Judge Morrison kept it simple. Last year, you two stood here out of necessity. Today, you're here by choice. That's worth celebrating. Caleb, do you choose Elena as your wife, knowing her fully, loving her completely? I do. Elena, do you choose Caleb as your husband, knowing him fully, loving him completely? I do. Then by the choice you've made today, I reaffirm what was already true. You are married. Not because you have to be, but because you want to be. That's the best kind of marriage there is. This time, Caleb kissed her. Long and certain, with Tom and Martha clapping, with sunlight streaming through courthouse windows, with everything they'd survived and everything they'd built shining between them. Outside afterward, Martha hugged Elena tight. That was beautiful, the choosing part. That's what marriage really is. Thank you for being here, Elena said. Wouldn't have missed it. That evening, back at the farm, they celebrated quietly. Dinner on the porch, watching the sun set over fields they'd worked together. The new ring on Elena's finger caught the light, different from the original but worn alongside it. 2 wedding rings, she said, studying them. One for necessity, one for choice. Keep both. They're part of the story. Our story. Yeah, ours. As summer turned to fall and another harvest approached, they faced it differently than the year before. This time, they worked as true partners. Elena confident in her role, Caleb trusting her judgment, both of them moving through the work with the ease of practice and familiarity. The second harvest was harder than the first. A late-season storm damaged part of the wheat crop, and equipment failures plagued them at critical moments. But they adapted, worked longer hours, solved problems together. When the last load went into the barn, they stood there exhausted and satisfied. Not as good as last year, Caleb said, reviewing the numbers. Still profitable. Still sustainable. Elena leaned against him. We'll make it work. Yeah, we will. The certainty in those words meant everything. Not naive optimism, but earned confidence in what they'd built and their ability to weather whatever came. As their second anniversary approached, Elena made an announcement. I'm stepping down as CEO, she said one evening over dinner. Caleb's fork stopped midway to his mouth. What? I'm transitioning to chairman of the board, letting Sarah Ortiz take over as CEO. She's brilliant, she understands the vision, and she deserves the opportunity. Elena spoke calmly, like she'd been planning this for months. I'll still be involved in major decisions, still drive the farm protection initiative. But the day-to-day operations, the constant travel, I'm done with that. Why? She reached across the table, took his hand. Because I want to be here. Actually, here, not just physically present while my mind is in Chicago. I want to focus on the farm, on us, on the life we're building. The company will be fine without me running it daily. Better, even, with fresh leadership. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She squeezed his hand. I didn't escape corporate life just to recreate it in Nebraska. I want something different, something real. This is real. I know. That's why I'm choosing it. The transition happened over 3 months. Elena trained Sarah, handed over responsibilities, restructured her role into something sustainable. By the time it was complete, she was working 20 hours a week instead of 80, focusing on strategy and policy rather than execution. The change transformed her. The exhaustion that had been her constant companion faded. She smiled more, laughed easier, found joy in small things that had been buried under corporate pressure. One afternoon in early spring, Caleb found her in the garden, now much larger than her first tentative attempt, planting seeds. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Planting vegetables. Martha's teaching me how to do succession planting so we have fresh produce all summer." "You hate gardening." "I hated not being good at it. I'm getting better." She sat back on her heels, wiping dirt from her forehead. "Besides, if we're going to have kids eventually, I should probably learn to grow things successfully." The casual mention of children still caught him off guard, but in a good way. They'd been talking about it more seriously recently, when to start trying, how many they wanted, how to balance Elena's remaining work with motherhood. "Speaking of," Elena continued, "I saw a doctor last week. Just a checkup, making sure everything's good for whenever we're ready." And everything's fine. She said whenever we want to start trying, we can. Elena looked up at him. "I was thinking maybe soon, like really soon, if you're ready." Caleb knelt beside her in the dirt. "How soon is soon? Like maybe we stop being careful and see what happens soon." His heart hammered. "That's a big step. We took a bigger one when we got married after knowing each other for 6 hours." She smiled. "This one we've actually planned for." "True." He kissed her, tasting dirt and possibility. "Okay, let's see what happens." What happened was nothing for 3 months, then everything at once. Elena discovered she was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in late summer. She took the test alone in the bathroom, stared at the positive result for a solid 5 minutes, then walked outside to where Caleb was working on the combine. "I'm pregnant," she said without preamble. Caleb nearly dropped the wrench he was holding. "What?" "Pregnant, baby, due in about 8 months." She was smiling and crying simultaneously. "We're having a baby!" He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, overwhelmed by joy and terror in equal measure. "We're having a baby. Are you happy?" "I'm terrified. But yeah, I'm happy." He pulled back to look at her. "Are you?" "Same. Terrified and happy and wondering if we're ready for this." "Probably not, but we'll figure it out." "Like we've figured out everything else?" "Exactly like that." The pregnancy wasn't easy. Elena had morning sickness that lasted all day for the first trimester. She was exhausted and emotional and uncomfortable. But she worked through it, delegating her remaining responsibilities, preparing for maternity leave, nesting in ways that made Caleb smile. They painted the spare room, again, this time in soft yellows and greens. Built a crib together, argued about whether they needed a changing table. Elena said yes, Caleb said the bed was fine, Elena won. Attended birthing classes where they were 20 years older than most of the other couples, and didn't care. As Elena's due date approached, the reality of becoming parents settled around them. One evening, 7 months pregnant and uncomfortable, Elena said what they'd both been thinking. "We have no idea what we're doing." Caleb, rubbing her swollen feet, agreed. "Nope." "What if we're terrible at this? Then we'll be terrible at it together, and hopefully the kid turns out okay despite us." She laughed. "That's not reassuring." "You want reassuring? Fine. We survived corporate warfare, arson, investigation, and 2 harvests. We can handle a baby. Babies don't sleep, or listen to reason, or care about quarterly reports." "Exactly. They're perfect training for dealing with board members." That got a real laugh. Elena shifted, trying to find a comfortable position that didn't exist anymore. I'm glad it's you, that we're doing this together. I can't imagine doing it with anyone else. Same here. Their daughter arrived 3 weeks early on a cold February morning. Labor lasted 14 hours, during which Caleb learned that Elena swore more creatively than he'd ever imagined and had a grip that could bend steel. When the doctor finally placed their daughter in Elena's arms, Caleb felt something fundamental shift in his universe. This tiny human, red-faced and screaming, was theirs. Their responsibility, their joy, their future. She's perfect, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. She's ours, Caleb said, equally awed. They named her Grace, for the grace that had brought them together, the grace that had sustained them through everything, the grace they hoped to give her. The first weeks were brutal. Grace didn't sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch. Elena struggled with breastfeeding. Caleb fumbled through diaper changes and felt perpetually useless. They were exhausted and overwhelmed and wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. But then Grace would smile. Actual smiles, not just gas, and everything else faded. Or she'd fall asleep on Caleb's chest, tiny and trusting, and he'd understand why people did this. Or Elena would watch him singing lullabies at 3 a.m. and look at him like he'd hung the moon. They figured it out the way new parents always did. Slowly, imperfectly, with lots of mistakes and learning and grace for themselves. Tom and Martha became surrogate grandparents, bringing casseroles and babysitting offers. Elena's executive team sent gifts and congratulations. The Farm Protection Program announced they were naming their next initiative the Grace Ryder Small Farm Sustainability Fund, which made Elena cry for an hour. As Grace grew, rolling over, sitting up, eventually crawling, the farm grew too. Caleb expanded the operation, Elena continued shaping agricultural policy from her board position, and they built a life that was messy and full and exactly what neither of them had known they needed. One evening, when Grace was 8 months old, Caleb found Elena on the porch, baby monitor in hand, staring out at the fields. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her. "Everything, nothing. How different this is from what I imagined my life would be." "Better or worse?" She leaned into him. "So much better, it's almost unfair. I thought success meant climbing corporate ladders, proving myself in boardrooms, building empires. But this..." She gestured at the farm, the house, the life they'd created. "This is success. Grace sleeping peacefully upstairs. You beside me, the farm thriving. People we've helped staying on their land. This matters more than anything I did before." "You still run a multi-billion-dollar company." "I guide it. I don't run it. There's a difference." She smiled. "And that's exactly how it should be. I spent years thinking I had to do everything myself, be everything to everyone. Now I know better. The best thing I ever did was learn to let go." "Is that what happened with us?" "You let go?" "No. With us, I held on. I chose to stay when I could have left, to fight when I could have surrendered, to love when it would have been easier to keep my distance." She turned to face him. "I let go of control. I held on to you. Best decision I ever made." Caleb kissed her, slow and certain, with the weight of 3 years and a lifetime behind it. That summer, they hosted a party to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of their vow renewal. Though really, it was just an excuse to gather the community that had become their family. Tom and Martha came, along with a dozen neighboring farmers and their families. Sarah Ortiz flew in from Chicago with other executives. Even Judge Morrison made an appearance. Grace, wobbling on new legs, toddled between adults, collecting smiles and attention. Elena watched her daughter with fierce love, marveling at how this life had unfolded. 3 years, Caleb said, finding her in the crowd. "Feels longer." "In a good way or bad way?" "Good, like we've been doing this forever." Elena raised her glass. "To forever, then." "However long that is." "However long that is," he echoed. They clinked glasses, surrounded by people they loved, on land they'd fought to keep, building a future they'd chosen together. As the sun set and guests filtered away, Caleb and Elena stood in the yard with Grace between them. The little girl pointed at the orange sky, babbling in her own language, and they listened like she was saying something profound. "Think she'll farm this land someday?" Elena asked. "Maybe. Or maybe she'll do something completely different. Either way, she'll know it's here, that her parents built something worth keeping."
Her grandparents and great-grandparents, too. Them, too. Caleb picked up his daughter, held her close. But mostly us. We're the ones who almost lost it and fought to save it. Elena wrapped her arms around both of them. We saved each other. The land was just part of it.
In the fading light, they stood together, three people where there had once been one lonely farmer, building a life that was real and hard and worth every struggle it had taken to create. The story that had started with a desperate proposal on a dusty farm had become something neither of them could have predicted. Not a fairy tale. Those didn't exist in real life. But something better. A partnership built on honesty, strengthened by adversity, sustained by choice. Elena had come looking for a husband to save her company. She'd found a partner who taught her that some things mattered more than empires. Caleb had agreed to a marriage of convenience to save his farm. He'd found a wife who taught him that letting someone in didn't mean losing himself. Together, they'd learned that love didn't always arrive the way you expected. Sometimes it came in a black SUV with impossible demands. Sometimes it grew slowly in the spaces between survival and surrender. Sometimes it was built from the ground up, one choice at a time, until the foundation was so solid nothing could shake it. As stars emerged over Nebraska farmland that had seen generations of riders and now would see generations more, Caleb kissed his wife and held his daughter and felt the weight of everything they'd built settle comfortably around him. This was home. Not just the land or the house, but the life within it. The love that had started as strategy and become truth. The family that had started as two strangers and become three people who chose each other every single day. The barn stood in the distance, rebuilt and strong. The fields stretched away, planted and promising. And in the middle of it all, two people who'd taken the biggest gamble of their lives and won something they hadn't even known they were playing for. Not a perfect ending. Real life didn't have those. But a good one. An honest one. An ending that was really just another beginning. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.